Hey guys, it's Christian. This is going to be an update video for a video I did previously called How Disney Star Wars Could Have Been. With that video, I went through all the movies and TV shows that Disney's produced since it bought Lucasfilm. And since I made that video about 2 years ago, I wanted to make an update video just to go through all the new movies and TV shows that Disney's produced and give my thoughts on them and how I would change them, just so that they fit the continuity that George Lucas established in his previous movies. So without further ado, let's jump in.
So first up, we have Star Wars Rebels, and this show was one of my favorite shows when it first premiered. You know, it was a little bit kind of kid-friendly in the beginning, but, you know, as the show went on, kind of found its voice and became more mature. You know, obviously by season 4, there's a lot of like death and sacrifice, and, especially with, the characters of like Kanan and Ezra, which was like, super, super crazy. But yeah, I definitely really enjoyed it. Overall, I thought this was like a great series. Didn't really have too many problems with it. First season, like I said before, is kind of like where they were trying to like find their footing and everything, kind of establish the characters, establish like who they are in the universe. Since this was an animated show, they kind of had to have that kind of younger audience in mind and everything. So yeah, I completely understand the tone that they wanted to set with that. I guess because, like with Clone Wars, obviously it was during the middle of like the Clone Wars. So obviously that show was like very, very more mature in its tone. So when it came to Star Wars Rebels, like my expectations were like really, really high to kind of see like, oh shoot, we're going to see, what happens right before A New Hope. We get to see kind of everything post Revenge of the Sith, how the Empire is like in power and how this rebellion's kind of slowly but surely starting to kind of bubble up and everything. So I guess my expectations were like really, really high. But I know you kind of have to have that relationship with the characters, kind of know who they are. You have to kind of play to your audience and everything, since this is animation. And, this is like the first, thing that Disney Star Wars has kind of done. Kind of want to get that younger audience involved, kind of get that next generation involved in Star Wars. So yeah, I completely understand that. I'm just glad that, Dave Filoni decided to kind of mature the tone as it went along. The character of Ezra Bridger, he starts off as kind of like this street rat character, kind of like Aladdin in Aladdin. He doesn't know anything about the Force. He doesn't know really anything about, the fall of the Republic or about the rise of the Empire. He's kind of really much on like the fringes of society with Lothal. Yeah, it totally makes sense that, he would kind of be this bratty teenager, so to speak. And, he gets brought into this group, this small band of rebels, and, he kind of matures as the show goes on. So yeah, I really appreciated that the show kind of reflected the main character, how he starts off very immature at first, and then he kind of grows into maturity, becomes a Jedi, and then eventually, sacrifices himself for the rebellion, having those giant octopus monsters take over Thrawn's ship and then send him off into hyperspace, which is really cool. And then I'll get to this a little bit later, but I'm glad that they're going to be bringing him back up in the Ahsoka show, and then we can kind of finish off that storyline with him, just because he's a great character, and I'm glad that he had his great run in Rebels, and then he gets to continue on into Ahsoka. So yeah, I'm glad to see that. Yeah, I guess my only like criticism was that the animation style was a little bit rough in the beginning. It felt very kind of like robotic in a way, kind of like what I was saying before. This is like the first Star Wars animated show under Disney's regime. So it kind of makes sense that they kind of want to stray away from the Clone Wars animation, where they said they were inspired by Thunderbirds or something like that. It was kind of like the puppet style animation with the Clone Wars, so that makes sense. And then this one's a little bit more like the edges are a little bit more rounded. The animation's a little bit more flowing, not as stiff as Clone Wars at times. But it was a little bit rough in the beginning. But I don't fault Dave Filoni for that. I know not only is he trying to find his footing with the writing and like the setting and the characters, but also with this new animation style. So yeah, I totally give him a pass for that. But yeah, that was like really my only like critique with that. I honestly don't really have too many things I would change about Rebels. I guess my only thing is maybe like they would just take a little bit more time to kind of like develop the characters earlier on, kind of give them more depth. It can be, family friendly, but not too like childish. I appreciate they kind of took like the Harry Potter route, where, they have like the characters and the tone kind of be more family friendly, and then it matures as it goes on. But maybe just have a little bit more of that darkness in season 1, and just have more like stakes in those earlier episodes to kind of, get that kind of hardcore Star Wars audience involved, as well as bring in the next generation of fans. So that was like really my only critique. I don't really do too many things to change it. But yeah, overall, Rebels is a great show. I enjoyed watching it, enjoyed all 4 seasons. Like I said before, the first couple episodes were a little, kid friendly, a little bit, but on like the slower side, not as many stakes going on. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I think they did a good job. All right, now we move on to Star Wars The Force Awakens. I think overall, out of all like the sequel trilogy, this is probably like the most rewatchable, just in my opinion. I think it did a good job at kind of honoring the original movies, especially the original trilogy. But I think the only downside is that, maybe it copied a little bit too much of A New Hope. I think it would have been actually really interesting if they actually took George Lucas's original treatments. I mean, kind of went with those. So I know there's reports of George Lucas's original ideas for the sequel trilogy, and some of them were actually really, really good. Some of them are kind of like, eh. But I think if they collaborated with, like Michael Arndt and, Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams, if they all were kind of in the writer's room together, took their time to like develop, what the new trilogy would be. I think just the only downside is that Disney bought Lucasfilm for like that $4.5 billion or whatever. And, they had to start cranking out new movies really quickly. So, I guess it makes sense that they kind of had to rush episode 7. But I mean, it kind of shows in the end, how like it does seem very rushed, where JJ really wanted to do like something for the fans. Kathleen Kennedy wanted to do something more for the fans and not necessarily, continue on the story that George Lucas set with the original trilogy. And, I think that it was kind of a shame that they didn't do that, just because looking back at George's, original treatments, just like, dang, he had some like really cool ideas to kind of move the story forward. And I know JJ's whole thing is like, we have to go backwards to go forwards. I don't know. I guess it just kind of comes at a bit of a detriment to the overall story. They really could have echoed the beats of the original trilogy, but while still moving forward, rather than just having a big carbon copy of A New Hope. But on like a more like positive note, with The Force Awakens, I think they did a really good job at kind of honoring the original trilogy while also, bringing things that are new. I think what was really good is like the whole ending with like the cliffhanger, literally on a cliff with Rey and Luke, and, Rey holding up the lightsaber to Luke and then having him join the fight where, yeah, I'll probably get to this once we get to The Last Jedi, but yeah, for now it's just like, okay, it was a bit of a retread of A New Hope, but, now we're kind of, setting the stage for something completely new in Star Wars. And, it was like a really cool, experience to have that, where, we have all this expectation, like, what's episode 8 going to be? Yeah, like I said before, I'll get into this with Last Jedi, but I'll kind of hint at it like now. But, it would have been great if, JJ and Ryan and Colin Trevorrow at the time, would have all collaborated on the new trilogy, because the reports are out that, they didn't have a plan for the sequel trilogy, where JJ just kind of wrote The Force Awakens, and then Rian Johnson just had his own ideas for Last Jedi and kind of ran with it. And, now we see the results. And, I'll get to this with Rise of Skywalker, but where, you're kind of going this way with Force Awakens, and then you're kind of, going to the left with Last Jedi, and then now JJ's kind of trying to steer the ship with Rise of Skywalker, get it back to his original timeline that he set in Force Awakens. Again, it would have been great if they just had, an overall story, an overall plan for the new trilogy, and, kind of went with that. I guess, they just had to, crank out Force Awakens as quickly as possible. And, it's just like, we got to make good on our $4.5 billion investment and, just get episode 7 out there without having a roadmap for where the story could go, or, have some collaboration between the filmmakers. Hey, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So, but anyway, those are my overall thoughts on Force Awakens. With this video, I didn't really want to do kind of like a breakdown of the movies themselves. I kind of just want to give like a kind of a brief overview of like my thoughts on the movies and the shows and everything, and then kind of just bring up like what I would change. Maybe another video or something, I'll do like a full breakdown of the different movies and TV shows, but I know there's plenty of other YouTube channels who do that, so I won't do that here. So yeah, those are just my overall thoughts on Force Awakens. Kind of like what I said before, like out of all the sequel trilogy, is definitely the most, in my opinion, just the most rewatchable, the most, I guess, consistent out of the 3 of them, even though it has like its problems and, it's very much a retread of A New Hope. JJ really did a good job, just setting up what the new trilogy could be, and, under the circumstances of, Bob Iger not wanting to use George Lucas's treatments and making more something for the fans instead of moving the story forward. It could have been a lot worse if you think about it. So I think, yeah, out of all the circumstances that I said before, we kind of got like the best result that we could with Force Awakens. And like I said before, I'll get to Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. But for now, those are my thoughts on Force Awakens. So yeah, we can move on. All right, now we get into Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And with this one, I actually really enjoyed this one. I think the first half for me is just a little bit clunky. The story's a little bit convoluted in a way, and the characters are just a little bit, some of them aren't really as three-dimensional. They're kind of just there, just to kind of move the plot forward, and, some of them could have been cut out. But I think the second half, once they're all together on Yavin 4 and they're making the plan to, get the plans for the Death Star, and, that whole third act with the Battle of Scarif, the battle in the sky, the rebel characters kind of infiltrating the base and getting the plans, Jyn and Cassian trying to get the plans and everything, the K2SO, I thought all that was great. It really reminded me of A New Hope and everything. Like, obviously, it takes place just before A New Hope, but yeah, it really just kind of gave me those feels of like watching A New Hope. Bringing in some of the characters from A New Hope, whether CGI recreation or just taking archival footage and putting it into the movie itself, was really great. I mean, I'll get to the CGI recreations a little bit later. Yeah, I thought some of the characters are great. There's a lot of like great humor, a lot of great action, a lot of great drama. Just seeing Cassian Andor kind of his full rebel form. I'll get to Andor in a second. Just seeing him him take on that leadership and everything. And, seeing Jyn Erso, her whole character arc, yeah, there's like, some problems with that. I guess just some of the way that they kind of introduced the characters was just a little jarring at first. Because I know there was like reports of a lot of like tampering with the editing. Like Gareth Edwards had this whole like original cut, and you kind of see this like in the original trailer. There's obviously scenes that weren't in the movie, things that were changed around. And I know that there was like a lot of reshoots. I think it was like, Tony Gilroy, who's directing Andor, kind of like took over the production and kind of steered the ship towards this other way. I think because originally it was supposed to be kind of like this, down and dirty, heist movie. You can kind of tell from like a lot of those early trailers how the tone was supposed to be. Obviously didn't really get that. So I guess because, Kathleen just saw the initial cut and, it was very intense, very dark, very dramatic. And I guess she just wanted to make it more, I wouldn't necessarily say like family friendly, but I guess like tone it down a little bit, kind of make it more Star Wars-y and not necessarily like, Saving Private Ryan in space. So I understand that. But yeah, it would have been nice if we kind of got like an alternate cut of Rogue One, kind of like that dark, gritty tone that was kind of established in those first teaser trailers and everything. But yeah, oh well. But yeah, those were like kind of like my overall thoughts for Rogue One. But yeah, as for like my negatives, the CGI recreations of Tarkin and Leia, I think the one that they did for Tarkin was fine. At the time, it was very controversial of having, bringing back actors from the dead and having, like a CGI recreation and all that. Apparently they got, permission from the Cushing family to use his likeness in Rogue One. Yeah, which is understandable. It was still a little off. I think if they just had the actor who was kind of doing the motion would have been really cool. Maybe put him like in a prosthetic or something would have been great. But yeah, having like a full-on CGI recreation was, just a little weird to look at. And it was kind of obvious as like, this is definitely a CGI recreation. And I know that this is kind of like the heyday of, the de-aging CGI or like the aging CGI and everything, and they don't really do that now. I'm thinking about like Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where instead of like having a CGI recreation of Chadwick Boseman, they just move the story forward and just have him pass away in the movie itself. Now filmmakers are kind of doing that now instead of like recreating actors who passed away in CGI or like archival footage, which we'll get into with Rise of Skywalker, but I'll leave that for later. The CGI on Tarkin was fine. If they kind of reduced his role a little bit, that would have been good. I know what they're doing now with the deepfake technology, like with Luke Skywalker in Mandalorian Season 2, which I will get to later, is probably the best way to go. And then kind of using it sparingly, kind of like what they did in Mandalorian Season 2 and with the Book of Boba Fett episode with Luke Skywalker in it, instead of just having a full-on CGI recreation, just because it has kind of like that uncanny valley feel to it. I guess it was what it was, and I think they did the best they could. And then I think if they were to do it now, they probably wouldn't recreate Tarkin in CGI. They'd probably just have an actor in prosthetic makeup and then just play the role that way. And then also with Leia, that was like the weirdest one. I think they really could have just had the actress, just turn, because literally they just had, Princess Leia turning around and saying, "Hope." And then they could have just had an actress, who looked like a young Carrie Fisher and just had her say the line. We would have understood that was Leia. We didn't really have to have like a whole CGI recreation. And, out of the two of them, that was definitely the most jarring one, more than the Tarkin one. The Tarkin one was, still a little off-putting, but the one with Leia, that one was just really bizarre and just didn't really look right. We're audience members, we're not stupid. We know who the characters are, just have them made up as the past characters, and then we'll figure it out. You don't have to have a whole CGI recreation of a character for us to understand who that person is. Anyway, I'm kind of going on a tangent, so yeah, let me get back. But yeah, those are kind of like my overall thoughts of Rogue One. I think if I were to change anything, I would kind of just make the characters just a little bit more three-dimensional. Maybe take some of the characters out, maybe have some of the characters that aren't really necessary to the plot just kind of taken out, or, just maybe combine characters, or, just kind of give more background to the characters in general. I know it's supposed to be a war movie, and with war movies you don't really know too much about the backstories of the soldiers or the characters who are in the movies themselves, but I mean you can still make them compelling in a way. I'm thinking about like Saving Private Ryan, with all those characters and all those guys kind of going on their journeys, even though you don't know too much about them, they all have kind of distinct personalities, they all kind of have moments of quietness where they're kind of explaining like who they are and who their backgrounds are, and they're able to kind of move the story forward with that. Made the story just a little more compelling, maybe show a little more consequences, maybe not have like the first half kind of jump from planet to planet to planet to planet, but really just kind of have it be just about, Jyn Erso, maybe just have it her perspective for most part, and you can kind of cut away to the Empire here and there, but just have it really be her story, kind of give her, the most background, don't just time jump from, when she's a little girl to suddenly in prison and kind of being broken out and kind of put it into the story and everything. Overall, I think this was like a really good movie. I'm glad it's kind of like just a one and done, it was a good way to kind of set up, how the rebels got the plans to the Death Star. Yeah, I thought it did a really good job with that, so Yeah, it was good. All right, now we move on to Star Wars Resistance. I don't really have too much to say about this show. To be honest, I haven't watched the entire series. I've just kind of watched a couple episodes here and there. So I guess my opinion isn't super valid. So I guess I would just kind of base it on, the episodes I have seen. But yeah, I think what I like about the show the most is kind of like the different animation style that it has. It feels kind of more like a 2D, 3D kind of hybrid show, which I think is like really cool. Kind of distinguishes itself from Rebels and from Clone Wars. I think what it really does well, just from the episodes I've seen, it kind of gives more background to like what was going on in the Resistance during the sequel trilogy, just because, episode 7 and 8 kind of take place like a day or two away from each other. You don't really get to see what happens then, and then, there's a time jump in between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, so it's kind of cool to see, what was going on in the background during those events. But yeah, I think like my only downside is that like this one, kind of like with Rebels Season 1, where this is kind of like a little bit more kid-friendly, a little bit more goofy, kind of more focused on like gags and stuff like that, which is fine just because, I know that this is like geared towards like a younger audience where, Rebels is more towards like a middle grade audience. This is definitely more for like, maybe like elementary audience. I mean, obviously all of Star Wars shows are meant for everyone, but like this is kind of geared towards, the younger viewers. I guess that was like kind of the reason why, I didn't get into the show as much, and I didn't really, follow it along as much, just because it wasn't really, towards my demographic. But I mean, it's no fault of the show, that's just, who the audience is. So yeah, as long as it's good for them, then, that's all that really matters. So yeah, I guess that kind of be my only like negative about it, but not really a negative. Kind of like I said before, like I don't have too many opinions about Resistance just because I haven't seen all of it. I think if there's like one thing that they could change is that if they could have kind of adopted more of the style from Rebels and kind of had a slightly more mature tone, just because, it takes place with like the Resistance, just so much like untold story that we didn't really get from the sequel trilogy. I know there's like books and comics and video games that kind of center around the Resistance. This could have been a really good way to kind of show like, hey, how did the Resistance get formed? How is it different from the New Republic? Maybe give more background to like how the First Order rose. Kind of going back to like my problem with Force Awakens is that there's like a 30-year gap. It's like what happened after the rebellion took down the Empire and now suddenly the First Order is in power. The New Republic, I guess, is still in power, but they're kind of like at a stalemate, I guess, and then the Resistance is like a completely different faction from the New Republic. It would have been interesting if Resistance kind of just delved more deeply into that background, and because not everybody reads the books or the comic books or plays all the video games, so having like a TV show that kind of explains all that backstory of like what happened during those 30 years instead of kind of having a family-friendly show. Anyway, maybe if I like watch a show, there could be more like Easter eggs, more explanation and stuff like that. Again, I haven't watched the entire show, so I can't really have like a valid opinion on this one. Just from like my perspective of being like a Star Wars fan and wanting to know more about the Resistance, it would have been cool if that was the tone of the show, that was the setting of the show. That was the premise of it, is that kind of gives more explanation of kind of like that gap that I was talking about before, like what happened in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, just as far as politics and the government. But yeah, I know that would be like super hard to do, have a show be all about politics and everything. So yeah, those are kind of like overall my thoughts of Resistance. Like it's a fun show for its audience, I'm sure, and I just kind of wish that they kind of gave more background to kind of like that 30-year gap in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. All right, and now we move on to The Last Jedi, and yeah, this is definitely probably the most controversial of all the Star Wars movies, in my opinion. I remember seeing it in theaters and at the very end being kind of like, huh? When it came to like, Broom Boy lifting up his broom as a lightsaber, and I was just like, okay. Because I guess like, yeah, my overall criticism of the movie is that, it kind of resolves everything, so to speak, in this movie. Like, who raised parents, at least, again, we'll get to Rise of Skywalker, but like, who raised parents, at least in this one, it's just like, they're nobodies. Like, who is Snoke? Who cares? Let's just kill them off. And then it's just like, well, who's the main bad guy now? I mean, I guess, Kylo Ren is the, supreme leader now. And, what's he really going to do? The rebellion's kind of left limping, but, Leia says, like, we have everything we need. And it's just like, wait, what? Where's the story going? I wish there was more consistency, between Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. Kind of like I said before, like, I just wish there was, a through line. I wish there was a plan. I wish, there was more collaboration between J.J. Abrams and Ryan Johnson, and then at the time it was going to be Con Trevorrow, but then it was replaced by J.J. Abrams, and yeah, I'll get to that later. I think if they were to kind of just stick with the decisions that Rian Johnson made in Last Jedi for Rise of Skywalker, I think I would have been okay with that. But the fact that, J.J. Abrams is kind of like trying to reverse engineer everything that happened in Last Jedi and, kind of make it more towards his theories that he had in Force Awakens, it's just obvious and, just doesn't really work. I guess what I appreciate is that, the fact that Rian Johnson was, bold enough to kind of slash down our fan theories of like Snoke is going to be kind of like the Emperor type villain, he's going to be like kind of this overall mastermind, trying to take over the universe, and maybe he's going to be the villain that Rey and Luke take on at the end of episode 9 when we didn't know that it was going to be called Rise of Skywalker. And then, with Rey's parents, like maybe, she's Luke's daughter, maybe she's Palpatine's daughter, maybe she's a Kenobi or something, all these theories that we had. They're just like, nope, she's a nobody. Her parents were drunkards, died in a pauper's grave or something like that, who sold her off for drinking money. It's like, oh, okay. I guess as time went on, people were kind of processing Last Jedi and, okay, maybe she's a nobody, but, now she can be whoever she wants to be. Maybe that's exciting. The fact that Kylo killed Snoke and the fact that, now he's the supreme ruler, what's that going to mean for the universe and the galaxy? So I guess people were kind of having their 5 stages of grief or something where there was like denial and then, it was like bargaining. It's like, oh, maybe there can be something salvaged out of all this. So I guess that's kind of what I appreciate about Last Jedi is that, even though, Rian, struck down our fan theories, at least, he kept us talking in a way. We're like, okay, now we're not following the conventional Star Wars trilogy. We have something completely new, and he kind of opens the door at the time for Colin Trevorrow to do episode 9 and not, I guess, be shackled by, these fan expectations that JJ left us in Force Awakens. So kind of opened the door for that, but, didn't quite happen. As I keep saying, I'll get to that in Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, I guess those are just kind of like my overall thoughts on Last Jedi. If I were to change something, kind of like I was saying before, just more consistency with the story and the characters and with the filmmakers and just having a plan in general. Kind of like what I was saying with Force Awakens, and probably what I will say about, Rise of Skywalker, it's like poetry, it rhymes, every stanza rhymes the last one. But anyway, yeah, let's move on. All right, now we move on to Solo, a Star Wars story. This one was fine. I guess I'll say some positive stuff first. One of the biggest things I liked most was Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. I think out of all the actors who were playing these legacy characters, he did the best one. Like literally, he sounded like him, he acted like him. His character made all the decisions that, Lando would make. I think the only downside, just in my opinion, is like his whole relationship with L3, which, just a little weird, but that's just my thoughts on that. I'll just leave that for another discussion. I thought like Alden Ehrenreich, did the best he could as Han Solo. I think it was definitely going to be like an impossible task to portray Harrison Ford's version of Han Solo and, kind of make it his own. He was always going to be compared to Harrison Ford. So when I saw the movie, I tried to keep my expectations low in a way. And, I guess I wasn't disappointed since I kind of kept my expectations low just because, Han Solo is my favorite character in the original Star Wars trilogy. So obviously I kind of had high expectations when I realized that there was going to be a solo Star Wars movie. But, after seeing, more of the trailers and like reviews and stuff, I'm just like, yeah, just kind of keep my expectations low. And, I guess I wasn't disappointed. It's like, just like a fun self-contained story. It tells the origin of, Han and Chewie and the Millennium Falcon and Lando in a really decent way. I think the only downside is that I guess Ron Howard kind of played it safe with this movie. It would have been really interesting if Phil Lord and Chris Miller, actually directed Solo, a Star Wars story, and apparently they were like 3/4 of the way done with production. They got fired, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then, Ron Howard kind of came in and, picked up the pieces and finished the storyline and everything. We saw who was laughing after that. Phil Lord and Chris Miller went on to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and, won the Oscar for that movie. And, Ron Howard and Solo, kind of became like the lowest grossing Star Wars movie at that time. And in a way kind of canceled all of the future Star Wars stories for film and everything until we get kind of like Rogue Squadron and the Taika Waititi movie later on. But yeah, that's kind of like my only downside is, the fact that Kathleen Kennedy has all these different amazing filmmakers, in mind, these movies and these, spinoffs and everything. She hired, Gareth Edwards, who directed like Monster and Godzilla, to direct Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And, just based on those early trailers, it looked like it was going to be like really dark and gritty. And then suddenly, she kind of takes him, silently removes him off the project and brings in Tony Gilroy to kind of pick up the pieces on that and, kind of make it more Star Wars friendly movie. And it's just like, oh, I was like, why'd you hire him if he's not really going to express himself the way he wants wants to. And then same thing with Phil Lord and Chris Miller, where, you know, you hire these amazing directors, you know, Lego Movie, 21 Jump Street, you know, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, these amazing directors. And then it's like, oh, you're kind of making Han Solo, you know, like a Ace Ventura type character. I mean, I wasn't on set, so I don't really know how things went down. You know, I guess, you know, Lawrence Kasdan was upset, Alden Ehrenreich was upset with the direction that they were doing. So I guess maybe it was a good thing that they were removed, but I mean, it would have been kind of interesting if we saw their take. At least it would have been exciting, you know, it would have been interesting and bold, but, you know, you gotta have Ron Howard, you know, George Lucas's boy from like Willow and all that, take the reins and everything. So I mean, I guess I understand it from like a business perspective. You know, you want to make good on your investment, you know, you don't want to have like, you know, a flop on your hands, but it turns out they did anyway, just by playing it safe. But yeah, anyway, yeah, those are kind of like my overall thoughts on Solo and, you know, kind of behind the scenes drama that happened just for the making of that movie. I mean, yeah, it's too bad that, you know, it didn't, you know, do quite as well as they wanted. And then that's kind of the end of their A Star Wars Story series. They only had series of two, and they, you know, they kind of dropped it after that. I mean, unless like Rogue Squadron is going to be a Star Wars story, but I think Rogue Squadron is just going to be just Rogue Squadron, not a Star Wars story, unless I'm wrong about that. So anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on Solo, and yeah, we can kind of move on from there. All right, now we move on to The Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2, and not gonna lie, this is definitely my favorite show on Disney Plus. Not only my favorite Star Wars show, but probably just like my favorite just show in general. You know, just from those first trailers, you just knew that they were gonna take this seriously. This is gonna be like, you know, a dark, gritty Star Wars show. I know George Lucas originally wanted to have a Star Wars set in like the underworld, as they called it, and yeah, this one definitely did the trick for sure. You know, it just has like the best action, the best acting, the best set design. I think the only one that kind of rivals it in a way is like Andor, but yeah, I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, as far as like Mandalorian, like both seasons were great. But yeah, overall, yeah, just a really great show. And, you know, just the production, you know, the fact that they have like the stagecraft technology where they can like make any single background that they want. They don't have to have like a blue screen or anything. Like the actors can just kind of see what's going on behind them. The camera can kind of turn with them and the background with them. And then obviously like Grogu, my man Grogu, kind of taking the world by storm. Yeah, I think my only like negative with the show is that there are some episodes that were more self-contained. You know, they have that episode with Mayfeld and his crew of like pirates and everything, and they kind of go off on this heist, and you kind of feel like that was kind of, you know, kind of veers off the rails a little bit, just as far as like the trajectory of where the show's kind of going, of like Mando on the run from the Imperials after taking the asset, and instead of delivering him to a Werner Herzog character. But yeah, it really does seem like, you know, it was kind of self-contained. It was definitely a bottle episode. But yeah, that was really like my own like criticism about the show, is that some of the episodes were like definitely more self-contained. Even in season 2, where he's helping like the frog lady, you know, on that ice planet with the ice spiders, you can kind of skip that episode. Season 1, in my opinion, was just like a little bit better than season 2. Just kind of had that dark, gritty tone, you know, had like that kind of Western feel to it. Mando going from place to place on the run from the Empire, and then also, you know, trying to, you know, make that money when he could. You know, it really had a really good like arc to that season. You know, like how it starts off on, you know, the planet of Navarro, and then it kind of trails off into different planets, and then it all kind of comes back to Navarro, and then actually fighting with, you know, with Greef Karga and Cara Dune against like Moff Gideon, and then, you know, the fact that they kind of like, you know, fly off in the end for more adventures was really, really fun. And then obviously, you know, Moff Gideon with the Darksaber still on his trail. I think season 2, like why it ranks a little bit lower for me, is the fact that, you know, it's kind of trying to be kind of like the backdoor pilot for these different shows. Like it's trying to spin off, you know, Ahsoka and at the time the Rangers of the New Republic, Book of Boba Fett, and then obviously Mando season 3 going forward. So it kind of becomes less about Mando's story and kind of about these other characters coming in and then eventually spinning off, which was okay. But yeah, it would have been cool if it was just Mando's season, and then at the time maybe in season 3 they would have kind of done that more. But yeah, overall I think, yeah, season 2 was great. I know some people have complaints about, you know, Luke Skywalker coming in at the end. I guess I'm kind of jumping into the changes, but I think if I were to change the ending of season 2, it's like maybe, you know, they take control of that Imperial ship, you know, they rescue Grogu, and they kind of take control, and then maybe they kind of fly off to see Luke Skywalker, you know, at his planet, and then drop off Grogu that way, kind of like echoing Force Awakens, where, you know, they defeat all the bad guys and then they kind of fly off, they find Luke Skywalker, and then that could have been a really emotional moment for Mando to kind of give up Grogu to Luke Skywalker, because he sees Luke Skywalker, you know, on his planet, you know, setting up the new Jedi Temple with those little kind of robot droids that we see in Book of Boba Fett later on. Mando realizes like, yeah, this is where Grogu belongs. You know, I have to give him up. You know, I have to kind of sacrifice my own own happiness, so to speak, and then give Grogu up to Luke Skywalker because, he's obviously Force sensitive and, he needs a Jedi to train him in the Jedi arts and everything. That could have been a good, springboard off for, season 3 of Mando, or I guess that storyline kind of gets picked back up again in Book of Boba Fett, which I'll get to later. But yeah, honestly, that's really like my only change. And then the obvious one of the deepfake technology with Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker, where it looked very, very jarring. And then one guy on YouTube who did like, hey, Lucasfilm, I did a better CGI recreation of Luke Skywalker, and like, here you go. And then he actually got hired onto Book of Boba Fett to do like the deepfake technology of Luke Skywalker, which I thought, yeah, it was pretty awesome. But yeah, that's like my only criticism about that. It's just like, yeah, the kind of off-putting CGI recreation of Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi era. Overall, yeah, I love Mandalorian and excited to see Mando and Grogu's relationship develop, and how they're going to get more involved in the Mandalore culture, and see how the Empire factors into all that, and his relationship with Bo-Katan. But yeah, great show. All right, and now we get into the Rise of Skywalker, and yeah, this is definitely the epic conclusion of the new trilogy. Kind of like what I was saying before. First, they had Colin Trevorrow do episode 9, and I haven't read the entire script for Duel of the Fates, his original script for episode 9. I read maybe about like the first 45, 50 pages, but from what I read, it would have been really, really cool if they actually went with that. The ones we have now, yeah, not so much. But yeah, kind of like what I was saying before, it just would have been great if, one, they just had the overall plan for the sequel trilogy, kind of just stuck out with that, or two, if J.J. Abrams just kind of went in the direction that Rian Johnson left him with The Last Jedi, instead of kind of like trying to steer back the ship to kind of like his storylines that he was setting up in Force Awakens. You can just tell that, there's just no consistency with the new trilogy. Like I said before, there's like plenty of videos explaining, how this is kind of like the anti-trilogy and everything, how everything's like not consistent. So I won't get too deep into all that. Yeah, it was just like a letdown in many respects. There's not really, too much to say about this one. Yeah, it was really just like a letdown for, the entire Skywalker saga, for the new sequel trilogy. Yeah, just don't really have too much to say. Alright, so now we move on to The Clone Wars Season 7. So I thought this was like one of the best seasons of The Clone Wars. Like my overall thoughts on Clone Wars was, just like a great series. I know we had the movie, which was, not the best. But yeah, as far as the series, obviously the first couple seasons were, a little like hit or miss. Just kind of like with any of the Star Wars animated shows, you kind of have to like find your footing, kind of set the tone, and kind of like grow as the show goes on. By the time they're introducing, like Cad Bane and, like the whole like bounty hunter storyline, and then, when Darth Maul came in, like that was like really where the show kind of took off. I think from like season 5 onwards is like really where I got like really into the show. As soon as they introduced Darth Maul, his whole storyline, I thought that was like really, really compelling. So I'm glad that they kind of like not necessarily like wrapped up his story, but ended his kind of Clone Wars era storyline in this show. And then obviously like with Ahsoka, that whole cliffhanger that we had in season 6, where she's brought back on the Jedi Council, but then she kind of turns her back and kind of goes her own way. I thought was it was really, really interesting. But yeah, I guess like my only like criticism was just like some of the episodes I felt like a little bit unnecessary. I think like the whole like kind of like Martez sister storyline, could have been cut out. I guess the only reason why they had it in there was because they had to really show what Ahsoka was up to while she was, excommunicated from the Jedi Council, and kind of see like what it's like, outside of, the temple, see like how normal people are affected by, the reign of like, the Separatists and the Republic during the Clone Wars and everything, to kind of give like a ground level view of like what's going on. But yeah, those were kind of the episodes that I wasn't really compelled by. Like obviously like the last couple episodes where, we see, kind of like the ending of Darth Maul's kind of reign with like with his all of his faction, the kind of like the resolution, the Mandalorians and everything, I thought was like really, really awesome. And then kind of like the tie-ins to Revenge of the Sith. Like I thought it was really, really interesting, the fact that, the Clone Wars, obviously the Clone Wars ends at the end of Revenge of the Sith. So it's kind of cool seeing it in animated form where like we're not necessarily following the primary characters like Anakin and Obi-Wan, but we're kind of following Ahsoka during this whole time, and like Rex and all the other clones as well, seeing them be affected by Order 66 and taking out all the Jedi, and how Ahsoka is kind of dealing with all that. Technically she's not a Jedi anymore, but she's still like a Force user, she still uses a lightsaber, and just seeing her and Rex kind of work together to kind of figure out like what's going on, everything that happened on the ship and as it was going down. I thought that was just like a really interesting interesting touch that they would do that, because at first I didn't think that they were going to have like a parallel storyline going on with season 7 during the events of Revenge of the Sith. I thought it was kind of be its own kind of storyline, kind of leading into Revenge of the Sith, where like maybe it ends with the capture of Chancellor Palpatine, General Grievous swooping in and taking Chancellor Palpatine, kind of like they did in like the micro series version. I thought it was going to kind of be like a CGI recreation of that, and then kind of lead into the events of Revenge of the Sith. But I think it was kind of cool that it was happening during the events of Revenge of the Sith. And the fact that they had like dialogue that was happening during that movie, and you kind of see like continuations of scenes like before they cut off in the movie, and kind of see where they went. And it totally makes sense that Ahsoka was there during that time, kind of seeing like her backstory. They didn't like retcon anything where it's like, wait, Ahsoka couldn't have been there. Like I didn't see her in the movie. Like where it was, like what? But yeah, Dave Filoni, he's definitely a master storyteller. He knows Star Wars. He knows like what works, what doesn't. He's just like a mastermind at everything. I'm just glad that he is where he is at Lucasfilm, telling amazing stories, like Tales of Jedi, which we'll get into a little bit later. But for now, back to Clone Wars. I think like my only criticism really, was just kind of like that whole Martez storyline. And I think if I were to change anything, like I think if they were to have like a full-on 22 episode season of Clone Wars, it would have been really cool. Just see more of it and just have more storylines, just more stuff kind of leading into Revenge of the Sith or events during Revenge of the Sith. But I know they're really just trying to have like, kind of like a mini season. I think there's like 12 episodes in this season. So they really kind of wanted to just streamline the story a little bit more and, kind of just wrap up the series, because I know they didn't really get that opportunity with season 6 because, obviously Disney bought Lucasfilm, and then, they had to cancel it because it was on Cartoon Network, which is owned by Warner Brothers. And then I know they had like a couple episodes that were on Netflix, like the lost episodes to kind of wrap up that story. But I'm so glad that Dave Filoni got the opportunity to wrap up his story and, kind of like a compelling ending, not only to the Clone Wars within the universe, but just the Clone Wars series in general, with just like an amazing epic conclusion, and then kind of plant the seeds for, what Ahsoka Tano might be doing later on in her shows, and, all the cameos that she makes, like in Rebels and Mandalorian and all that. Kind of going back to Rebels, I'm glad that he got to kind of end the show on his terms with that show as well. Hopefully we can kind of get more Dave Filoni stuff in the future. We'll get to more of his stuff later on. But I'm just glad he is where he is, and, he did an amazing job wrapping up the Clone Wars series. So not really too much to change with that one. Okay, now we move on to The Bad Batch, and this one was a pretty good show as well. I think my only like downside is that I kind of wish it was just kind of more of like a self-contained series that didn't necessarily kind of continue on to a season 2. I think they had a really good arc with this series, because at first I thought it was gonna kind of be kind of like what I was saying before, like kind of like make the Saving Private Ryan comparison, where it's kind of about the Bad Batch and they're kind of on this kind of like last mission, which would have kind of been cool if like Omega was kind of like Ryan in a way, and they had to like save her from Kamino and from all these different Imperials who are trying to go after her, because she's like another unaltered clone, kind of like Boba Fett was, and kind of be on the run. And then maybe each one of them kind of sacrifices themselves like as the series goes on, until they kind of get her to kind of like the safe haven area where she can kind of live on and thrive. But obviously Dave Filoni has an overall story that he wants to tell, and just based on the trailer for Bad Batch season 2, you can tell there's going to be a lot more obstacles that they have to overcome, with Crosshair kind of on their tail, and then obviously with the Imperials and the Kaminoans with their whole scheming at the end of season 1. So we'll see how it goes. But that would really be like my only criticism for that series. I think it was really cool at the beginning how it takes place like during Order 66, and it shows little young Kanan on the run with his master, and then seeing his master killed off, and then him running off from the Bad Batch, and then feeling kind of conflicted, like what's going on, what's happening. And I think it was really interesting the fact they're not really affected by the whole Order 66, the chip in their brain to make them turn against the Jedi, where they're kind of like more aware of everything. I think if like this was kind of like more of like a limited series, not necessarily like there's not like a season 2 or 3, but if like they kind of just made this more like maybe like 10 episodes instead of like 16 episodes they have here, they kind of just had like a serialized show where every episode there's like a different obstacle they have to overcome, and there can just be more of like a through line, and then as the show goes on, maybe they can like sacrifice themselves, or like one of them can sacrifice themselves or something, and can have like a resolution at the end of the season. But that's really like my only criticism, just because there's just like a couple episodes early on where they're kind of like going from like place to place, and obviously they're on the run and everything, and they kind of have like their little side quests that don't really connect with the overall story. They're just kind of like fun adventures here and there, which I thought could have been cut out. Kind of like what I was saying before, gonna kind of have like that family-friendly element to it, just because, it's an animated show, it's more like focused for kids, so you have to have like the Omega character in there to kind of have that audience connection. I guess it's interesting because it's like the Bad Batch is like this kind of like Clone Wars spin-off, so you're thinking it's gonna be kind of like this like gritty like war show and everything, but then you have like, this like cute little Omega character in there, and you kind of have like that juxtaposition. I feel like that's kind of like the theme now that they have with Disney Star Wars, is you gotta have like the dark and the light, the balance, where you kind of have like the older, wise, mature, gritty characters, and you have like the younger, kind of immature, impulsive characters, and you have to combine them. They've kind of been doing that with Rebels, with like Kanan and Ezra. They've been doing it with Bad Batch, with the Bad Batch and Omega. They've kind of been doing that with like Obi-Wan and little Leia. Again, which is totally fine. You gotta have that family-friendly audience, because like Fast and Furious say, no, it's all about family. Or like Guardians of the Galaxy, this is my family. It would be nice to kind of like that more kind of like just a grittier feel, in Star Wars with the animation, kind of like what they did with Clone Wars. I'm glad they were doing that kind of more like with Andor and everything, which I'll get to later. But for the animated shows, if they have kind of more for like a teen audience, and then like, a middle grade audience, and then for, like the younger audiences, which I feel like they are doing that, but it'd just be nice to have more, I guess, consistency. It was like, it's animated, just have it more for like, the younger audience of this live action before like the older audience or something. But yeah, that's like my only like critique of the show. I kind of expect it to be more like a darker, intense show, and then, as soon as Omega came in, you kind of, I guess, gotta have that heart in the show. Overall, yeah, it's a good show, and I look forward to see what Dave Filoni has in store for season 2, and, just based on the trailers, I think it could be really compelling, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, now we move on to Star Wars Visions, and I thought this was like a really good series. Again, kind of like what I said with Resistance, I haven't seen every single episode of Visions. I've only seen a handful, just because I know some of them have been really good, and some of them like haven't been as good, so I kind of just watched the ones that audiences were like really responding to a lot. The ones that have like the highest ratings on like IMDb or so. Like my opinions for Resistance, like this won't be like 100% valid until I see all the Star Wars Vision episodes. But as far as like the ones that I have seen, I thought those ones were actually really, really good. I appreciate the fact that they're taking different animation styles, like Japanese animation and like all these other animations from like around the world, just because, Star Wars in part is based on, Akira Kurosawa, like Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and, Hidden Fortress and all this stuff. So it totally makes sense to have, a Jedi character or, a Force-sensitive character, look like a samurai, with their swords and, have that anime feel. So I thought that was really, really cool seeing all that. But yeah, I guess my only criticism, like, again, I haven't seen all of Star Wars Visions, but like some of them I saw were just kind of like, they were like okay, but that's mainly because, it's like a different storytelling technique. I'm a big anime fan, and, like when I'm watching like Naruto or something, that's clearly different from, another show that would like Gravity Falls or something, where clearly there's like a different storytelling aspect to anime. Like with anime, like there's a little bit more internal dialogue, a little bit more kind of like explanation of like what's going on. The characters are always kind of like, before my power move, I'm going to do this and then that and then that. Whereas like with American television, they kind of just, it's more like show don't tell. And with anime, it's kind of like show and tell. Anime kind of just takes its time a little bit more than American animation, where American animation is kind of like, kind of go. Where anime, takes its time. The storytelling's not as traditional. You can kind of be more experimental with that. The tone kind of switch back and forth. So I totally understand. But yeah, honestly, that's like really like my only like criticism from like what I would see from Visions. And honestly, there's not really much I would change. These are just like self-contained stories. They don't tie into the overall Star Wars saga. They're just kind of like experimental films in a way, that kind of just take, the Star Wars aesthetic and then apply it to their different form of animation. Once I see all the episodes, I'm sure I'll have greater appreciation for all the talents that these animators have. And then, yeah, I'm looking forward to a season 2. I'm looking forward to seeing more animation styles and different stories within the Star Wars galaxy that are kind of influenced by, Japanese animation and, anime and samurai films and everything. So yeah, it should be good. All right, now we move on to the Book of Boba Fett. This show was okay. What would have been really cool is if, this was actually just a movie. Originally, they were wanting to do a Boba Fett movie, like way back in the day, like way back when they were announcing, the fact that they were going to be doing Star Wars stories, like Solo, Star Wars story announced, and like Rogue One, and then back when Obi-Wan was just going to be like a movie, or I guess like a trilogy at that point. And then they had Boba Fett with Josh Trank directing, but then, he got fired after all the controversy he had, like after, I guess wrecking a hotel or stuff like that. And then obviously the failure of Fan Four Stick, as I call it. And then, I guess the project was shelved until now, where they're actually going to have like a series instead of just a movie. And, I thought Boba Fett's appearance in Mandalorian season 2 was like actually just one of the best episodes of season 2. It was really cool just seeing like how amazing he was. And, just in my opinion, in the original trilogy, and you can hate me all you want, but I thought Boba Fett was a little bit overrated. I honestly thought Jango Fett was a more compelling character, so don't hate me too much. But as soon as I saw him in the episode of Mandalorian, I was just like, oh dang, yep, Boba Fett is awesome. He pretty much took down an entire garrison of stormtroopers all by himself. So I was really looking forward to seeing him in the Book of Boba Fett, because Mandalorian season 2 kind of had that post-credit scene of Boba killing Bib Fortuna and then taking the Hutt throne. So I thought it was really going to be kind of like, like a Godfather type series in the Star Wars universe. So I was really looking forward to it. But the fact that they made him more of like an honorable mafia head in a way, I don't know, it was like a little bit of a letdown in my opinion. It would have been cool to kind of see that grittier, I know I keep using that word gritty, but it would have been nice. But I feel like in here, it really applies just because of the tone that they set in Mandalorian season 2 of how Boba Fett is. Would have been really cool. And I guess there were like rumors about, there was like a lot of like script tampering, I guess like John and Dave had ideas for what they wanted to do with Boba Fett at the end of Mando season 2. And then, I guess Kathleen and the story team, kind of put their fingerprints all over it, and they kind of, we got to make Boba family friendly. We can't have him be evil or anything, or be like an anti-hero or whatnot. So they have to make him like an honorable leader of this town of the Hutt clan and whatnot. So I thought that was kind of like a missed opportunity. It really could have been, like I said before, like a Godfather or like Goodfellas in the Star Wars universe and everything. So I was like really looking forward to that. As far as like positives and stuff, like I really appreciated like the flashbacks they had. Like I was like in awe when I saw Boba Fett like in the Sarlacc pit, him fighting his way out and everything. Like thought that was really cool. And then seeing that hand pop up, that image that we've been always wanted to see, at least, the fans since Return of the Jedi in 83 have always wanted to see, like, how did Boba Fett get out of the Sarlacc pit? And then we finally got to see it. I thought they nailed all that. Meeting out of the Sarlacc pit, and then, meeting up with the Tuskens, and, kind of being involved in their culture a little bit more. It was really cool seeing more of, like, the Tusken culture, because, as far as we've seen, just seen kind of, like, hints. They're kind of like these savages and everything. Like, they're vicious, mindless creatures, as was said in Attack the Clones. But it was cool seeing, like, how, they have this, like, spiritual, honorable side. And, we kind of see, like, how Boba got that staff that he had, like kind of Tusken staff in Mando, how he kind of met up with like Fennec Shan. I thought, all the flashback stuff was cool. It's just all the stuff in the present. He was like, I gotta get back to my Bacta tank. I've been injured, it's time for a bath. I thought, that was kind of weird. So I feel like they could have kind of delved more deeply into, the gangster aspect of it. I thought the one scene that was really cool was like where they're actually taking out the members of all these different factions all at once. And then they realize like, oh shoot, they're coming after me next. That was really like, kind of reminded me of The Godfather, where they're taking out the heads of the 5 families. Other than that, I think if it was just like a movie that focused on Boba Fett, being like that dark, intense character that was set in Mandalorian season 2, would have been really cool. Kind of like what they originally set out to do. If they were to make it a series, just have it be about Boba Fett and not really, jump to different storylines, different characters. Like the fact that, I'm not complaining about this, but by like this episode like 5 and 6, where they kind of completely go away from Boba Fett's character, and we pick up with the Mandalorian getting that N1 fighter and flying off, and then, meeting up with Luke Skywalker and with Ahsoka. Obviously that could have been, in Mando season 2 if they wanted to, or beginning of Mando season 3. But the fact that, Boba Fett's show got hijacked by Mando, and, it was like, it's going to be the Mandalorian spinoff show. And then, okay, oh shoot, we got to get back to Boba Fett. I thought that was kind of an interesting choice. So I think if I were to change the show, either just make it a movie or maybe like, I don't know, like a 6-episode show that was just about Boba Fett, dealing with the Star Wars underworld, just being a full-on gangster. Just cut the Power Rangers out. I know they had their own name, but I'm going to call them the Power Rangers. Just cut them out completely. So those were my overall thoughts on Boba Fett. I guess we're not getting a season 2, so... All right, now we move on to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is like another show that I was kind of like, I guess, 50-50 on, kind of like with Book of Boba Fett, where, there's like some great, amazing stuff in it, but then there's also some of the stuff that was like, why did that have to be done? I think the highlight of the show was definitely Hugh McGregor. Like, he was definitely the best part of the prequels as Obi-Wan. I thought he was great. He gave like a really compelling performance. I think it was just like, kind of like I was saying before with Book of Boba Fett, if this was just like a movie, because I know they originally had it as a movie, and then I was like, oh no, this is gonna be a trilogy, which I guess technically they did with the show, because there's like 6 episodes and they're all like roughly an hour each, except for the 4th episode, which is just like half hour of in and out. And done, but I'll get to that later. So really, like, the show really is like a trilogy in a way, and it really could have been really, really compelling. I guess my biggest problem with the show was the character of Reva. The fact that, kind of like how like Mando hijacked Boba Fett, like I feel like she kind of hijacked this whole series in a way. You know, she could have just been, you know, this really cool Inquisitor character. I mean, I didn't mind the fact that they gave her like a backstory of, you know, being, you know, one of the younglings during the whole Jedi Temple purge. I mean, you know, she was the one who got away, and then eventually, you know, she kind of infiltrated the Inquisitors, you know, became an Inquisitor, and, you know, kind of rose up in the ranks in order to get close to Darth Vader and then kill him off. I mean, I think that's like a compelling story from there. But I think if they just started off with that, you know, have that be like the opening scene of episode 1 or something, and then kind of go into her story, I think would have been cool. I think the fact that, you know, they kind of start off her character as this intense Inquisitor, and then, you know, the fact that she's like, Obi-Wan, I know all about Anakin and all this stuff. It's like, wait, what? And then you don't really find that out until like later on, be like halfway through the series and everything. I think was kind of a mistake in a way. If you're gonna make the show about Reva, just have her storyline be introduced at the beginning of the season and then kind of roll it out as the show goes on. Either that, or just have her own series in general, which maybe they'll do, since at the end of the series she just kind of just like runs off into like, you know, the twin sunset and everything, you know, trying to find her own way, even though it kind of contradicts a lot of the events in A New Hope. Where I guess now Luke knows that, you know, that there's Inquisitors like after him or something. But anyway, yeah, I thought, yeah, Reva was like a fine character. I just wish her backstory was just introduced a little bit earlier on in the show, just so we kind of empathize with her, kind of understand like where she's coming from, and then, you know, would be, you know, on her side as she's kind of trying to rise up through the ranks of the Inquisitors and, you know, take out Darth Vader, which, you know, obviously won't happen. But just to see like her like try to attempt to do it would be really cool. So that's like really one of the things I would change about Obi-Wan, is that, you know, just having, you know, just more Reva backstory at the front of the show rather than like kind of dish it out over time. But because obviously it's called Obi-Wan Kenobi, so we kind of came for Obi-Wan. You know, we want to see that rematch between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, which we got, which I thought, like, you know, the initial fight they had was pretty good. I think that was like the end of episode 3 or something. But it was just weird that the fact that like Darth Vader used the Force on Obi-Wan and then kind of threw him into the fire, and he just, instead of kind of like rolling him around and everything, you know, he's just like okay, well, now I'm just gonna head out. It's like, well, like, why don't you just like kill him from there, you know? It's like, you're gonna like let him burn, why don't you like let him like suffer a little bit more, you know, instead of just like, okay, I'm just gonna put it down and then, yeah, head off after that. So I thought that was kind of a little bit of a, you know, contradiction. And then like the rematch at the end of episode 6 obviously couldn't have been as epic as Revenge of the Sith, since it's 10 years later, you know, neither one of them have fought in a lightsaber duel, or at least film and television wise we haven't. Yeah, I know there's like a bunch of stuff in the comic books with Darth Vader, which I haven't read, but I assume, you know, he hasn't had as an intense of a lightsaber duel as he had with Obi-Wan. So I thought that was like, it was a little underwhelming, just in my opinion, the rematch. But I know it wasn't supposed to be about the action, it was really supposed to be about the drama going on. And I think the fact that, you know, when Obi-Wan sliced open Darth Vader's helmet, we see, you know, Anakin's eye, and we see that, you know, he's still a human being in there, but he's, you know, gone, you know, mentally he's just gone. You know, Anakin's not there, and now it's just Darth Vader. I think they nailed that. So when they do have that rematch in A New Hope, it's like, yeah, we understand, yeah, Anakin's dead, and now it's just Vader at the forefront. So yeah, now it's not really as emotional. It's like, now I need to take out this enemy, you know, I'm going to train your son to take you out eventually. And, you know, we obviously see what happens with that, but at least with this show, you can kind of understand, you know, why these characters, you know, feel the way they do about each other. And I thought the flashback to the kind of Attack the Clones era of Anakin and Obi-Wan was really, really cool. Seeing all that would have been really cool if we just had a full episode just about young Anakin and Obi-Wan, build up their friendship, you know, build up their, you know, somewhat rivalry they have with each other. I thought would have been really cool. And then another thing I thought was kind of a missed opportunity is that we didn't really get much of Vader in this show. I would have been fine if they kind of reduced Reva's role down a little bit more and they kind of gave more for Hayden Christensen, Darth Vader to do, but yeah, so obviously that was like a missed opportunity with that. It's a show about Obi-Wan, but it's really about Reva. You can just call this Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Reva story or something like that, because it just really wasn't about Obi-Wan. It was really just Reva's show in a way. But yeah, I guess, yeah, more positive things. Like, I love the young Leia, the actress who played young Leia. I thought she nailed the tone for Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia in A New Hope. She was great. It was cool seeing Alderaan. It was cool seeing Bail Organa and his wife, kind of see more of that culture. You know, there was just a lot of moments in the show where I'm just like, I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. And then there was also moments where I'm like, can't believe I'm actually seeing this. So yeah, kind of like with Book of Boba Fett, it's kind of like a mixed bag. Like when it was working, but then when it wasn't, it's just like, yeah, this is not going well. So yeah, overall, I think if this was just a 2.5 hour movie just about Obi-Wan and the main antagonist being Darth Vader, this could have been a really, really cool like movie. So yeah, that's really the only real thing I would change about it, instead of kind of like, stretching it out into a series and, having subplots that, aren't really as compelling in my opinion. Oh yeah, and the little end tag with Qui-Gon, I thought it was fine. I think it would have been cool if that was at the end of episode 5, and that's kind of like what inspires Obi-Wan to get back into the fight and, take on Darth Vader and, save Luke and everything. But they didn't. They kind of, Obi-Wan already had his arc, and then Qui-Gon appears, and then it's like, oh, hey, I'm here to give you some encouragement at the last second. It's like, oh, Master, I'm already my full self. Oh, but I can tell you about joining the Force, become a Force ghost just like me. And they're like, oh, okay, good. Even though Yoda already brought that up at the end of Revenge of the Sith, how that can already be done. But, I guess I can do it now at the end of this series. I mean, that'll probably help me 10 years later when I get struck down. And Darth Vader becomes the master now. But yeah, anyway, those are my overall thoughts on Obi-Wan. It was, another kind of like hit or miss show for me. When it was working, it was working. When it wasn't, not really. And yeah, that could have just been a movie. So yeah. Anyway, let's move on. All right, and now we come to Andor, and I guess I'll give my overall thoughts of the show. Overall, I think it actually a really good show. I enjoy it. I think just my only downside is that there's just a lot of episodes that nothing really happens. It's like really slow. So I think if this was either kind of like what I'm saying about other shows, if this was just like 2.5 hour movie or just like a 6 episode series, I think it would have been really compelling. Just because there's just like some episodes where like they're playing the heist and everything. Where there's like episode like 4 or 5, and nothing really happens. It's like you have that kind of this compelling ending at the end of episode 3, and then by the time you get to episode 4 and 5, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well now we're kind of walking through the forest, or making this kind of like wooden diagrams of what we're going to be doing. I don't mind that in episode 4, have that transit, but then episode 5 is like, okay, we're just going to walk to the actual Imperial Bank. We're just going to like walk up to it and then look at it, and the next episode we'll have the heist. Yeah, that was just like, this really could have just been like 6 episodes. You're gonna have like those first 3 episodes just be one episode, and then kind of go on from there. Have episode 2 and 3 be the heist, and then episode 4 and 5 can be the jailbreak. Episode 6 can be the finale that we have. I guess like my biggest criticism is that sometimes it just doesn't really feel like a Star Wars show. It just feels like a really cool just sci-fi show. I talk to my friends about this a lot, and like we get super excited. It's like, oh, it's Stormtrooper, oh, a TIE fighter, and then it's like, okay, now we're just walking through the forest talking, or it's like, oh shoot, the Imperial Senate, and then okay, now we're kind of in this kind of flying taxi cab or at this like formal dinner just talking, like, oh, okay. Which, obviously I don't mind there being like politics in Star Wars and everything, just to kind of see how the rebellion formed, how the Empire is all, reigning over the galaxy, and kind of see how these different characters kind of go from their kind of disparate situations and kind of join into the fight, either join into the fight to, take down the Empire or to kind of like build the Empire up and everything. So I thought that was really cool. There's just a lot of just moments where it's like, okay, nothing's really happening, I don't mind dialogue scenes, but can we get some more action here? Yeah, those are my overall criticisms for the show. But yeah, to kind of like jump into the finale, I thought the finale was incredible. This is a show that I've been wanting to see. Kind of, we're finally starting to see these people who are under, this imperial reign, rise up. Kind of gave me kind of like Hunger Games vibes, or like, like Les Mis vibes of, like the people who are kind of under the oppression of the Empire, finally rising up, fighting back, starting a rebellion. Marva, Andor's mother's character, it's like, we're gonna have a reckoning on our hands, and it's like, yeah, we're finally starting to see it. Andor finally joined the fight. He really like lost everything, lost his mother, his friends were in danger, but he finally got them out of danger, and it's like, okay, I got the people that I love out of harm's way, and now I can finally join the rebellion with Luthen and join the fight, and hopefully they'll meet up with Saw Gerrera's character and kind of go from there. But yeah, I'm excited for this show. Like, again, like if this was just like like a 6 episode series, I kind of take back what I said earlier. I don't think this would have worked as a movie. I think this would have just worked better as like a 6 episode. It's like every season is like 6 episodes or something instead of like 12 episodes, because I feel like the show really dragged on a lot. Even like with like the prison stuff where Andor gets sent to prison, it's really just showing like the prison life, where it's like, okay, I'm showing the prison life, and I don't like it here, and I think we should escape. Nah, we'll stay here for another 30 cycles and everything. And then finally, they have some initiative to finally break out. Episode 10 was definitely one of the highlights for sure. One way out, one way out. Like, I was just cheering for those guys when they were like, jumping off the side of the building into the water and everything, and I felt bad for Andy Serkis's character, the fact that he couldn't swim. I thought that Andor was going to like grab his arm and, they're going to jump off together and he was going to like swim away and everything. But yeah, obviously that didn't happen, and we didn't really see what happened with his character. Hopefully in season 2, we'll see more of him. But yeah, honestly, I thought he was way better better in this series just as himself than he was as a CGI, Snoke character in the sequel trilogy. But yeah, it was cool kind of finally seeing, Andy Serkis, without the little CGI dots on him, because he's an incredible actor. So just seeing him, just as himself in this universe was really cool. But yeah, those are really like my overall thoughts of the show. I'm excited for season 2. I'm glad we finally got, like a rousing ending to this series, because yeah, there were moments when I was watching where I was like, I think I kind of just want to stop watching. There's not really much happening. It was kind of like how I felt with some of the other Star Wars shows, minus Mandalorian, kind of like Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, where like, yeah, where it's working, it works, and then when it doesn't, it's just like, nothing's happening. But yeah, overall, I think it has like the best acting, best writing, best like production design, one of the best visual effects. It's up there with Mandalorian in a way. And if you take out the Star Wars aesthetic, it could just really just be like a compelling just sci-fi show about like politics and like the rise of a rebellion. So I think in that aspect, Tony Gilroy, the showrunner, is doing good. I know there's reports that he's not a Star Wars fan, which you can kind of tell. He's really just telling like a science fiction version of Game of Thrones with just some Star Wars little crumbs in there for us fans. But yeah, so I'm excited for season 2. I'm hoping that we kind of get more Star Wars lore in there. Can kind of show more of those missed opportunities, like show more of the Imperial Senate, kind of like the dissolving of the Imperial Senate. Oh yeah, that tease of the Death Star at the end of this episode, where you see like they're in the prison, kind of making little bits and pieces for the Death Star, which I had theories about, and I watched the YouTube channel Star Wars Theory. He had theories about. Now it's finally confirmed. So that's really cool that they didn't go this prison planet for nothing, to the fact that they were actually using the pieces for the Death Star, and the fact that once your prison sentence ends, they just send you to another level and you continue on your prison sentence, and the people don't like know about it, or else they'll get fried, which I thought was really cool plot twist. And the fact that the aesthetic of the prison, where you step on it and they can just like press a button and you can get electrocuted or fried or whatever it is, which was really cool. It's like, oh shoot, how is Andor gonna get out of this? But like obviously he did it in one episode, which I was surprised by. Or like the episodes leading up to it, it's just like, okay, like we hate being in this prison and it's terrible and learning all these twists, and then suddenly in episode 10, like we planned the heist and we're gonna break out. So I was like, oh, we could have done that 3-4 episodes ago, but oh well. But anyway, so yeah, I'm excited for season 2. I'm glad that Andor's finally in the fight, and that we can kind of get more connections to Rogue One, maybe get more Mon Mothma, more Saw Gerrera, more founding of the rebellion, and yeah, just kind of plant the seeds for what's going to happen in Rogue One. Yeah, I'm excited to see Andor, his character arc, because it was really surprising in this story. I was surprised to see like how kind of roguish he was, where he just killed those 2 officers in cold blood, and he was always on the run. He was always like backstabbing people, or like betraying people in a way. He's kind of in it for himself, and then he realizes that it's like, yeah, I can't be on the run. There's this empire, it's taking over my homeland, my mother passed away due to all this, and her whole dream was to like kind of have that spark of the rebellion and fight against the Imperials. And now he's like, no, I'm all in, I'm gonna fight this empire, I'm gonna bring it down. And yeah, now I'm excited to see him finally getting together with K2SO, having that whole relationship, being on Yavin and being in the heart of the rebellion, and then taking those steps to finally take down the Empire once and for all in the events in Rogue One. So yeah, overall, this is like a really good show. I'm excited for the next season. There were a couple episodes I could have done without, and it would have been nice if it was just like a shorter season, just more serialized, self-contained, faster paced. So I hope for season 2 that they kind of, take the criticism to heart for the hardcore Star Wars fans, and just pick up the pace a little bit, have more Star Wars tie-ins, more Easter eggs here and there, instead of having it in Lupin's shop. But that's for another time. Just kind of continue on, the rise of the rebellion and the fall of the Empire. So yeah, I'm excited for season 2 and definitely recommend this show. All right, now we move on to Tales of the Jedi, and this is like another great show that I really liked. Obviously the fact that Dave Filoni is all over it, anything he really touches is gold, so I knew that this was going to be good. Just based on the trailers, just seeing the young Dooku and then, more backstory for Ahsoka, I thought was really cool. Honestly, the only downside is that I wish there was more. Not only do I wish there was more, but I wish there were like longer episodes. That would have been really cool if like these were actually like, 22-minute episodes, but I know these were like, short stories. For what we got, like we got some really, really cool, compelling stories, and I was particularly interested in like the Dooku episodes, just seeing him get more backstory, just seeing like why he turned away from the Jedi Council, and seeing, kind of like the flaws within the Jedi. Obviously we kind of see that in the prequels, but we kind of see like, they're kind of blind to a lot of this other stuff that's kind of going on in the galaxy, and maybe there are alternatives to bring down the dark side, or like end the war, and like the, Separatists versus like the New Republic. Maybe they don't have it all figured out and everything. So even though, you might not agree with everything Dooku was standing for, you can kind of understand it a little bit more. I'm glad they had like characters like Qui-Gon in there, because he was kind of like in the gray area, as far as like the Jedi Council. They had Yaddle in there, and that whole duel that Yaddle and Dooku had, and then eventually, he slayed Yaddle down. Like that was very like dark and very dramatic. I'm like, yeah, see, you can do kind of dark dramatic stuff in animation and everything. It doesn't have to be like super kid friendly and all that, and you can tell a compelling story, not have too much violence and too much darkness and stuff like that. And then seeing more of like Ahsoka, her storyline, just seeing her whole origin story about how, as soon as she was born, she was already force sensitive, and she can already have communication with like animals, and kind of like manipulate their minds and everything. Thought that was really cool. I think the only like downside for that is like I thought we would actually see the Jedi Council visiting her planet, and then her family having to actually give her up, because we haven't really seen that in any Star Wars shows or movies or anything. I guess the only thing we've seen was when Anakin gets taken away by Qui-Gon in episode 1, but obviously he's like a 9-year-old kid. It wasn't like him as a baby being taken away, so it would be kind of cool if we saw that. But yeah, totally understandable with that one. But yeah, I love like the episode where she's training with the clones, and then we kind of see like, I was like, okay, why is she doing all this training stuff? And then we see kind of flash forward to the Clone Wars episode, the season 7 episode, where we see like how she puts that all in use. Like, oh shoot. So I thought that was like really, really cool, really emotional scene. And then seeing like the funeral for Padme, I'm seeing it from a different perspective, and the fact that Ahsoka was there that whole time, and the conversation she has with Bail Organa, the fact that okay, we may have lost this battle, but we're not gonna lose the war, and then the origins of her becoming Fulcrum, and then how she continues on like Rebels, and then Ahsoka, and then all that. So yeah, it just kind of got me more excited for the Ahsoka show, see more of Ahsoka's backstory and her history, how she's like compelled to do the things she does in the rest of the Star Wars series and films and everything. So yeah, I'm definitely excited for that. And then yeah, with Dooku, just seeing more like backstory with him, because like we didn't really get too much of him in Attack the Clones. Like he showed up like halfway, and then obviously we got some stuff in Clone Wars, but we didn't really get too much like backstory stuff. We kind of just got stuff of him scheming throughout the Clone Wars and everything, and then obviously he Revenge of the Sith, he gets killed off, and don't really get too much with him. So it was cool to kind of like watch the series, and then maybe like later on rewatch episode 2 and Clone Wars and episode 3, and kind of see like why he did the things he did, why he turned to the dark side, how he kind of sees the cracks in the Republic and in the Jedi Order. Oh yeah, and another thing, the episode where Ahsoka is kind of like in that kind of farm planet, she has to hide her powers, and then obviously this traitor teenager guy tells this Inquisitor about her, and they have their little duel. Kind of reminded me of the duel in Rebels between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, where it was kind of very short and everything. It would have been kind of cool if it was like a big full-on battle, but I know this is kind of more of like an emotional battle, kind of like they established in Rebels. So yeah, that's totally understandable, but it would have been cool if we kind of saw more, because he was a very like interesting design to him. Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like the Sith character in Knights of the Old Republic, or like the early concepts of like Kylo Ren with his mask and everything. So it would have been kind of nice if like we at least got to see his identity after his head got chopped off and everything. But I know this is more like Ahsoka's journey, and not necessarily about the whole kind of Sith influence, but really just her journey into becoming this kind of new hope in a way of the galaxy, and like helping out the new rebellion characters. But yeah, overall those were my thoughts on Tales of Jedi. Thought it was a really great show, and I wish there was more.
Now move on to the Bad Batch season 2 and 3. And yeah, overall I really enjoyed both seasons. Like I honestly don't really have anything to complain about. Yeah, as far as like season 2, like when it came to season 1, like I really thought it was just going to be kind of like a self-contained story. I thought it was just going to be kind of like the fallout after the events of Revenge of the Sith with Order 66, and then wiping all the Jedi. And then of course with the Bad Batch, being immune to the chip that was implanted in all the clones to make them turn against the Jedi and everything like that. So I really wasn't expecting there to be a season 2 or a season 3 for that matter. Really thought it was just going to be the Bad Batch, trying to take care of Omega, who's this kind of unaltered clone, kind of like Boba Fett was, and they're trying to take her to like a safe haven. And then as the story goes on, like the Bad Batch members get sacrificed one by one, and then they eventually get Omega to the safe haven, and then she lives happily ever after and everything like that. So I wasn't expecting like the whole cliffhanger of the Bad Batch on the run, and then the different villains are going after them, especially Hemlock. Yeah, I really thought like Hemlock was a really, really cool character. It was really cool seeing his whole arc throughout season 2 and 3 as kind of like the main antagonist who's going after the Bad Batch. I guess my only criticism is that I kind of wish that there was a little bit more sacrifice within the Bad Batch characters. Like I really think that the whole sacrifice of Tech for the rest of the Bad Batch was really cool, really emotional scene. As season 2 is going on, I really didn't think like, oh, I guess they're not really going to sacrifice the characters. I know it's like kind of like a kid-friendly Disney Plus show. They're not going to kill any of these characters off. But then once they got to the episode where Tech actually gets killed, and they don't bring him back, because like I thought like they were going to kill him off and maybe bring him back at the end of the season or in season 3, but like nope, they kill him off, and yeah, he's gone. Like, oh, dang, okay. I was getting like really, really emotional during that scene. And, the characters felt that way too. So as, season 3 was going on, they were hinting at like Wrecker getting killed off or like Crosshair getting killed off and all this stuff. But, obviously they survived. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I really thought like the character development was really cool. Like, it was really cool seeing more development for Crosshair. He turns away from the Bad Batch and kind of gets wrapped up in the Empire, trying to search for the Bad Batch. But then, as the story goes on, his heart changes. He sees how the Empire is treating all these different clone troopers and, phasing them out, and then eventually, hiring stormtroopers to, carry on the missions and everything like that. His turn, I thought was really cool. Again, I thought they were going to kill him off and everything, when he ended up killing that Imperial officer and then getting arrested and then, being tortured and everything. I thought that's the way that he was going to get killed off. He's going to have a redemptive moment and then get sacrificed, but, he survived, which is fine. Processing it more, having the characters be killed off, I guess doesn't really make a difference because, Omega is kind of like the heart of the show. And, the fact that, the Bad Batch, survived till the end to help Omega, finally be free from Hemlock and all the Imperials and everything like that. I thought that was really cool. And then kind of opening the door up for more adventures for Omega to be in, they kind of cut to like several years later where they're on the island and then Omega is like all grown up and, so we see the old version of Hunter, talking with her and everything in the cave. And, she's like talking to him about, oh, I'm going to join the rebellion because, they need fighter pilots and things like that. So I kind of have theories like maybe she'll be like one of the main characters of Rogue Squadron, the movie that's going to come out directed by Patty Jenkins. So we'll see if that happens, maybe not, but it'll be cool to see, a live action version of Omega. The people who watch Bad Batch would already have an attachment to her as this main character, in Rogue Squadron, being this fighter pilot. So it'd be cool to see Omega like in a Top Gun in space type movie. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, as far as like, the Bad Batch seasons 2 and 3, like I really enjoyed them. Like again, I think like if it was just slightly less episode seasons, maybe like 10 episodes per season, just because, kind of drags on sometimes. There's some episodes where, it's really self-contained or, just one thing happens that kind of gets us to the next place. Sometimes you can just combine episodes or just have the story go on, but I know they kind of want to stretch it out because, you want us to care about the characters and, have their, character development moments and whatnot. But yeah, that's really like my only like criticism of that. Just like, maybe like 10 episodes per season, kind of get the ball rolling a little bit more. And then, I would have said like more sacrifice in it, but I know Dave Filoni's just not that kind of guy. And I think he said in an interview he didn't want to sacrifice any of the Bad Batch, except for Tech, of course, but he really just wanted to be more about like hope and, positivity and not really have it be too dark. Even though, yeah, there were times where it's like, oh dang, this is getting really intense, especially the finale of season 3 where, everything's going wrong, the crap's hitting the fan and, Hemlock's desperate to get Omega, away from the facility and then, continue his plan of Project Necromancer. But yeah, overall, I think it was like really good 2 seasons. I really enjoyed them. And yeah, I'm definitely going to miss watching, these characters. I really did grow attached to, Hunter and Wrecker and Crosshair and Echo and Omega and all the other characters. Yeah, even like Emery and, Nalase and all the characters who helped them out during the finale of season 3, I thought was really cool. And, even Fiji Noah, I thought she was really cool too. But yeah, overall, yeah, it was a really great couple seasons. Had a really good time. And yeah, hopefully we can see these characters more in other future Star Wars projects. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, awesome show. All right, now we move on to The Mandalorian season 3. And yeah, this is probably my least favorite season of the show. I think it would have been better if they just focused on Mandalorian and Grogu. I mean, I know we're going to get the movie in 2026, but I think if we just focus on those characters, focused on them reuniting the clans and everything like that, I think would have been really cool. We got that really cool cliffhanger at the end of season 2, Mando handing off Grogu to Luke Skywalker, which is really cool. And then in Book of Boba Fett, we got that side quest where we caught up with Mandalorian and Grogu reuniting and then eventually kind of going off, on their own adventure and everything like that. But I think like the main thing was that, it kind of ended with this whole big cliffhanger at the end of season 2 with Mando picking up the Darksaber and then, being worthy of being the ruler of Mandalore. And how that was Bo-Katan's whole quest was to get the Darksaber to, unite the clans and become the head of Mandalore again. But I really thought it was going to be kind of like a Game of Thrones kind of thing where it was going to be Bo-Katan and Mando kind of battling against each other for the throne of Mandalore. But it really seemed like, at least when we had that kind of side quest in Book of Boba Fett, Mando had the Darksaber and, he wasn't really fit to wield it. It was like very heavy for him and everything like that. And the fact that he didn't really care about ruling Mandalore at all, like all he really wanted was Grogu. And then, he finally reunited with Grogu and they're going to kind of go on their own quests and everything like that. And then Mando's whole goal of being reintegrated into, his faction of Mandalore with the armor and everything like that. So I think like the first couple episodes were actually pretty good with Mando reuniting with Bo-Katan on Mandalore and get baptized in the living waters. I thought was really cool. And then, him getting pulled down by the mythosaur and getting knocked out, and then Bo-Katan seeing the mythosaur and like, withholding this kind of secret that, there's this mythosaur that's, under the surface, and, because, she sees this beast and, that could possibly lead to her being this, grand leader of Mandalore and everything, but then she withholds that information, and, she kind of mentions it again to the armorer, but I really thought it was going to like be a setup for this whole big battle at the end on Mandalore, and that, maybe Bo-Katan will like ride the mythosaur and then use it to defeat all her enemies and everything like that, but, it didn't quite happen, so that was kind of a bummer. But yeah, I really thought it was going to be like this whole like Game of Thrones-esque type battle between Mando and Bo, but really like there's just like that one episode, it was like episode 6, which is probably the worst episode, the whole episode with Mando and Bo-Katan, teaming up to figure out this whole conspiracy of these super battle droids like going haywire and, destroying the towns and everything. And yeah, the whole episode with Lizzo and Jack Black, in their kind of like Hunger Games type outfits. And then Christopher Lloyd as like the crazy scientist and all that. But yeah, we won't go into that. But at the very end, Mando, gives the Darksaber to Bo, and then she, takes possession of it, ignites it, and then she finally unites the clans, Mando's faction and then her faction of Mandalorians. So now they're all united and they're ready to take on the great threat that is Moff Gideon. And, Moff Gideon finally comes back into the story. We kind of have this whole setup of him, with the Imperial Remnant, and we're kind of hinting at, Grand Admiral Thrawn's return, because we got that little tease in season 2 with Ahsoka, fighting Morgan Elsbeth and saying, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?" So now we're kind of getting more of that payoff. There's mysteries within this season of like, they're being attacked by the Imperials and that they might be coming back. But yeah, I guess some other good things. I really enjoyed Mando finally being kind of reintegrated into, his faction of Mandalore, after he was, baptized in the living waters, and now Bo-Katan is in that faction as well. Seeing little Mandalorian boy getting integrated into the Mandalorian culture as well, even though we kind of had that dumb episode of him being, kidnapped by a giant bird creature and then all of them trying to save him, but yeah, we won't talk about that one either. But yeah, it was really cool just seeing like their culture and everything, seeing how Grogu is being integrated into the culture as well, proving himself, fighting against the Mandalorian boy, with Mando kind of adopting him as a son. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah, so then all the clans are reunited and they're, going against to fight Moff Gideon and, his clones and everything. I really thought like the climax where the Mandalorians are, infiltrating Mandalore, and they find out that, there's this whole mine where Moff Gideon and all of his different stormtroopers are trying to mine all this, Beskar steel, and, Gideon makes himself a suit of Beskar steel and, goes against the Mandalorians and goes against Paz Vizsla, and the fact that Paz Vizsla gets killed off, I thought that was, pretty intense. So then they have their whole, end fight and everything. Some stuff was, kind of dumb with, Grogu, trying to escape and then going on that little lamppost and his little legs going, I thought that was kind of dumb, but whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I was kind of let down by the climax. I thought it'd just be a little bit more epic. I think the episode before the climax was actually really cool. The small group of Mandalorians infiltrating the mine, Paz Vizsla sacrificing himself, getting killed off and everything. But then we kind of get into, the final confrontation with Moff Gideon, and, Mando hits the trigger and like detonates all the clones. So Gideon's kind of betraying the Emperor and trying to use Grogu's blood to revitalize these different clones that he's trying to have and everything. But, that doesn't end up working. And then one of the Mandalorians, rams the ship into the base and, kills Gideon off. Never saw a body, so we don't know if he's coming back again for season 4. I know, like, Giancarlo Esposito has been kind of hinting that maybe he might come back, maybe his clones comes back and tries to kill off Mando, because I know we're getting a season 4. But yeah, then it ends with, the clans united, and then Mando and Grogu, living happily ever after on the steps and everything like that. So yeah, I guess it's like a pretty okay season. Definitely wasn't expecting it to go the way it went. It did wrap up a lot of storylines and everything, and, kind of open the door for what the movie's going to be and what, a next season could be for Mando. But yeah, it was kind of just an okay season. A lot of like unnecessary storyline. But the whole Dr. Pershing episode was kind of unnecessary. Kind of this cool action scene in the beginning with Mando and Bo, fighting off all the different, TIE fighters, trying to outrun them and everything. And then we kind of cut to Dr. Pershing and Elia from the last season, and this whole kind of conversion of the Empire to the New Republic, and that whole storyline is kind of like, Strangers on a Train, by Alfred Hitchcock or something, that whole episode, but it ends up going nowhere. Dr. Pershing gets taken and then, gets tortured, gets like mind altered or whatever. And, we never cut back to him. So maybe in Mandalorian season 4, we'll get more of him. But yeah, it's kind of like pointless, that whole episode. And of course, the Guns of Fire episode, like I mentioned before, it's kind of pointless, very jarring tone-wise, didn't really fit into anything within the structure of the Mandalorian. But yeah, so overall, it's just kind of like an okay season. Yeah, definitely kind of like a low point for the Mandalorian show. And, hopefully like the movie will redeem it, and then hopefully maybe season 4 will be even better. So we'll see how it goes. I think because maybe like Dave Filoni was kind of distracted by all the Ahsoka stuff, that he didn't really have time to really work on the script for Mandalorian season 3. So maybe that's why it was a little weaker. But yeah, I guess we'll never know. But yeah, overall, yeah, kind of a weak season, and yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with the future of Mando and Grogu. All right, now we'll move on to Young Jedi Adventures, and honestly, don't really have too many opinions on this show. I've only really watched the shorts that came out, before the season premiere a couple years ago. From what I watched, it was obviously very kid-friendly. I know this is playing towards more like a preschool audience, which yeah, is totally fine. It's just obviously not really my demographic, so don't really have too much to say about it. I didn't really try watching, the series. I just figure I kind of got everything I needed from watching the shorts, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's definitely made for a younger audience. As far as I know, it's not really anything canon for the Star Wars universe, so it's not really anything kind of like essential that I need to watch. But I'm sure for like the audience that does watch it and loves it, I think that's awesome. I heard good things about it, but yeah, it's just something that I'm really not invested in watching, so I don't really have too much of a valid opinion on this one. But yeah, I just thought I'd just mention it here, just because it's Disney Star Wars, and I want to give everything like a fair chance and everything like that. But yeah, I don't really have too much to say, but I'm sure for people who watch it and like it, that's awesome. But yeah, it's just not quite for me. But yeah, just thought I'd mention it here. All right, now we move on to Star Wars Visions Volume 2, and I actually really enjoyed this volume. I think I liked it more than Volume 1. I think Volume 1 had like a lot of good stories in it, but I really only liked a handful, and I really enjoyed that most of them were all kind of like a Japanese animation inspired shorts and everything. But with this one, there's a little bit more diversity in the animation. They kind of had animation styles from around the world, so that was really cool. A lot of animation that I really loved. There's like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse type animation. There was like stop motion animation. There was like claymation. Yeah, they just had like a lot of cool different styles. They kind of like a Leica style animation, and then obviously they had a bunch of like Japanese animation styles in it too. So yeah, I really enjoyed all of them. There's just like a couple that I didn't really care for. More of like kid friendlier ones. Kind of like what I was saying with Young Jedi Adventures. It's like I'm not really quite the demographic for like the younger style animation. I like more of like like the darker, kind of like more mature type animation. Like I really enjoyed like Sith, the one that was kind of like Spider-Verse animation style. I thought that was really cool. Or like Journey to the Dark Head or The Spy Dancer. I thought those were really, really cool as well. And yeah, not only that, but they also kind of told like really deep stories as well. Something that was kind of like very emotionally resonant and everything like that. Like characters, who are in like oppressed societies and, trying to break free. It's like a theme in Star Wars, the Empire oppressing on the rebellion, and then, them banding together and believing themselves to, push through and, win the day and everything. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, overall, I don't really have too many, negatives about this volume. Just like I said before, there's just some that I didn't really care for as much, but I didn't think they were bad. They're just not really my demographic. But yeah, I'm hoping that we get like a volume 3 sometime, maybe make this like, like an annual thing, like every May the 4th or like every other May the 4th, and we get more Star Wars Vision volumes with more animation styles and everything. So yeah, I don't really have too many criticisms about it. This was a really cool volume. I liked it more than the first volume, and I'm looking forward to more animation styles and more volumes in the future. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, now we move on to Ahsoka, and overall I think this series was okay. Like it was definitely one of my most anticipated series that were going to come out last year, and I don't know, I was just a little let down by it because I love Rebels so much, and I had such high expectations, especially after the cliffhanger that we had at the end of season 4. The fact that Ahsoka and Sabine were going to team up in order to find Ezra, and then that tease that we got in season 2 of Mandalorian of Ahsoka's quest to find Grand Admiral Thrawn and find out like where Ezra took himself and Thrawn out to parts unknown in the galaxy, once he summoned the Purrgil to attach to the Imperial starship and fly out. So yeah, I was really excited to see that whole answer to that question that we're gonna get. I think the show did okay. I think maybe if it was just like 6 episodes and they kind of picked up the pace a little bit, because the first couple episodes are a little bit slow. The fact that Rosario Dawson's acting as Ahsoka is very just subdued, because she's a very lively character in the animated versions, in Clone Wars and Rebels and everything like that. But I know like the whole thing is that Ahsoka found out that she just lost Anakin to the dark side, and that he became Darth Vader, and then he was killed. So she's very like subdued, she's kind of closed off from the Force, wants to turn away from it, doesn't really want to associate herself with it, and then we also kind of got that teaser in Book of Boba Fett where she meets up with Luke Skywalker, and they're kind of like discussing the problematic relationships that they have with Anakin / Darth Vader and everything like that, and not wanting to confront the past. So I understand why she's more reserved in her emotions, but I guess it wasn't really an excuse to have her acting just be flat. She can still be a dynamic character even though she's trying to be more reserved and things like that. So yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't know, back and forth on that. that. I'm glad we finally have it in episode 5, which, yeah, probably one of the best episodes. You know, I know they're kind of like trying to pull at the heartstrings with having Hayden Christensen return as Anakin Skywalker. So I know they're trying to like, you know, pull a fast one of like, have our like nostalgia glasses on and think like, oh my gosh, this is such a great episode because Hayden Christensen is back as Anakin Skywalker, which is fine. And I think it was really, really cool. You know, I think having those flashbacks of young Ahsoka, you know, with Anakin in the Clone Wars is really cool, even though we don't really get to see much. It was just kind of like cloudy background. So it's kind of like, okay, they're probably on a sound stage and they're filling the set with, you know, smoke and everything so that they don't have to pay for, you know, a big battlefield visual effects background or anything like that. But yeah, I still thought it was like really cool seeing Hayden Christensen back as Anakin Skywalker. Even though, you know, you don't really need to have him back, I thought it was going to be more of like, you know, flashbacks to the Clone Wars era with younger Anakin and younger Ahsoka, which we got, but I thought it was going to be like more like an actual flashback instead of like Ahsoka waking up in the world between worlds, you know, after a battle with Balin's skull, and then, you know, seeing like a Force vision version of, you know, these flashbacks and all these events and stuff like that. So I guess we kind of got like a 50-50. It wasn't quite a Force ghost, but, you know, it wasn't quite official flashbacks. So I thought that was still pretty cool. And I think like the lesson that she learned from Anakin, you know, that was pretty cool too, of, you know, having to like fight and she can't, you know, just like live in self-pity and everything like that. You know, she really needs to join back in the fight, you know, rescue Sabine, you know, who's been captured by Balin and Morgan, and, you know, break her out and then eventually, you know, find a way to get to Ezra and everything like that. I thought that was a really cool lesson for sure. Overall, I think the acting for the characters was great. You know, especially Ray Stevenson as Balin Skull. I think he was probably the best part of the entire series, really. Like, he was really kind of one of the best actors in it for sure. And it's a shame that, you know, he ended up passing away and that we won't be able to see him more in Ahsoka season 2, because I know we're getting a season 2. So I have a feeling they're probably just going to recast. You know, I really hope they don't do like a CGI recreation like they did with Tarkin in Rogue One or Princess Leia in Rogue One as well. I really hope they just recast the role with a fantastic actor. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I thought he was great. I thought Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Hera was great. You know, she's definitely on par with, you know, the Hera that we got in Rebels. I thought Sabine was okay. The actress Natasha Leo Bordizzo I thought was really cool, but I think just like the way she was written was just kind of bizarre. You know, the fact that she became Ahsoka's apprentice, I really thought they were just gonna be more like partners in crime, you know, trying to find Ezra, but it's like, oh no, Ahsoka's teaching Sabine how to become a Jedi. Like, oh, I didn't even know she was Force sensitive. And, you know, this whole thing of her, you know, trying to like, you know, like move the cup with her mind and everything like that. And then suddenly at the very end, she's able to, you know, force push Ezra across the platform onto the ship after they, you know, rescue him and everything like that. It's like, what's going on right here? And I know the whole thing with like George Lucas saying that, you know, everyone is technically Force sensitive. You know, there's more people have a higher midichlorian count than others. All you have to do is really like train and tap into, you know, your connection with the Force, and then, you know, you can become all powerful. But I think she just became powerful way too quickly. You know, it's very reminiscent of like Rey in Force Awakens becoming powerful way too quickly. And, you know, Sabine isn't related to a Palpatine or anything like that. So it's like, where did she get this high Force ability? So yeah, that was like a problem that I had with that. But anyway, yeah, I think everything else was great. Yeah, I thought, you know, Shin Hati was really cool. I thought like Thrawn was cool. I thought he was gonna kind of like do a little bit more in his episode. I mean, he didn't really do much. He was just kind of like just standing around looking at little charts and readings and, you know, tracking the characters as they're getting closer to his base, and, you know, eventually just flies off to the main galaxy and everything like that. So I kind of thought there would be something more kind of grandiose with his character. I'm sure they're setting that up for, you know, the kind of crossover film that Dave Filoni is going to be directing soon. So I guess this is kind of more of like a tease, because I don't know if we're going to get season 2 first or if we're going to get the Mando crossover film first. So maybe season 2 will come first, since that was officially confirmed. We'll get more development for Grand Admiral Thrawn, kind of more understanding of his plan, and then, you know, that'll kind of lead into the Mando crossover film that we'll get. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, overall, I think it was, yeah, just kind of like an okay series. I don't know, I guess I was just kind of expecting more from it. Maybe just like a little bit faster paced, a little bit more of like that Rebels energy and feel. You know, I know that this is like Dave Filoni's first attempt at directing live action. You know, he's been doing animation this whole time, and then going from animation to live action, I know it's like a very big jump. So, you know, he's kind of trying to find his footing with how to run a live action show and everything. So yeah, I don't blame him. You know, I think this is a good like attempt, and then hopefully season 2 will be even better. And then of course, I'm sure the movie's going to be amazing. So at that point, you know, he'll find his footing, and then, you know how to direct actors like on a set, and, you know, give those emotional performances instead of like directing like, you know, a voice actor or anything like that. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, overall, I thought it was fine. Yeah, it wasn't my favorite show. You know, I know there's like big Ahsoka fans out there, which is awesome, and I'm glad if you love the show, that's awesome. But if you didn't like the show, I kind of understand. So yeah, I was kind of like in the middle with it. But yeah, I'm still excited for season 2. You know, I'm glad that we got the kind of Ezra reunion. Seeing Ezra in live action was really cool. You know, I think the actor Iman Esfandi did a really good job of portraying Ezra. It was cool seeing him like the beard and the shaggy hair and everything. You know, seeing him, you know, older and whatnot. whatnot. Again, I thought it'd just be like a little bit faster paced. I thought there'd be a little bit more urgency. It's okay, we're finally reunited, let's get off this planet. But then they're kind of like hanging out with these kind of like crab turtle creatures at their little hut and whatever, riding the giant like wargs around and whatnot. I'm just like, what is this, like the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi? Like, what's going on? But yeah, it was cool like hearing, what Ezra's been doing on this planet this whole time, what Thrawn's been doing this whole time. But yeah, I just thought there'd be a little bit more urgency meeting with him and then getting off the planet. And I thought the finale was really cool too. Yeah, I didn't expect Morgan Elsbeth to be a Night Sister and everything. I thought that was really cool twist, and seeing more Night Sisters, using their magic and, resurrecting, different stormtroopers, having that whole army and everything was really cool. And then Resurrected Inquisitor, Marok, I thought was cool, even though, he gets killed and then turns into green vapor. I thought, oh, okay. I thought they were going to do more with him, but I guess not. So that was kind of a bummer with that. But yeah, so Ezra reunites with Hera and the rest of the rebels to fight against Thrawn and the Imperial Remnant. Thrawn and his army of ghost troopers are on their way to the main galaxy to finally take over and everything. So maybe we'll get like the Grand Admiral Thrawn movie, maybe like an Heir to the Empire movie with the Mando crossover film, which would really, really cool. And then Ahsoka and Sabine are stuck on the planet with Baylan and Shin kind of going on their own separate journeys. So maybe they'll all team up and hop on a Purgle to take them back to the galaxy. So that happens. Maybe we'll get more Anakin Skywalker Force Ghost mentorship for Ahsoka. So we'll see how it goes. So yeah, I think overall like it was fine. Definitely ended like in a cliffhanger to see what happens with season 2 and the Mando crossover film. But yeah, I just kind of expected more from it. Definitely thought Baylan Skoll was the best part of the show. And yeah, I mean, acting was okay, writing was okay, action was pretty good actually. I like all the lightsaber duels and the space battles and everything like that. I thought that was cool. But yeah, it was just like the writing overall was just kind of like a low point for the show. Just expect it to be a little bit more faster paced, a little bit more urgency. Yeah, just a little bit more from it. But yeah, overall fine show. And yeah, hopefully we'll get better season 2 and the Mando crossover film. All right, now move on to Tales of the Empire. And I actually really enjoyed this show. Yeah, I don't really have too many criticism about it. Kind of like what I was saying with Tales of the Jedi. I kind of wish that these were longer episodes. And, again, like I know that these are supposed to be short stories and everything, but some of them are actually really interesting. Yeah, I thought the Morgan Elsbeth story was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite one. I think the Barriss Offee one was definitely my favorite, but, starting with the Morgan Elsbeth storyline, I think it was really cool seeing her whole backstory of how she was like, like a Night Sister kind of character, like training, with like her magical abilities and things like that. And then, her home gets wiped out by the Imperials. And then, she's kind of like the sole survivor. And, she eventually kind of like tries to use that anger. At first she's trying to use it to like protect her home and protect her family. But then, slowly but surely she kind of, unravels and then becomes evil, kind of becomes the oppressor. And then, Grand Admiral Thrawn sees that and, wants to like use that for his own cause. It's kind of cool seeing how those two characters, finally connect, because we see her in an alliance with Grand Admiral Thrawn. We get that tease in Mando season 2. And then, kind of comes to fruition in Ahsoka. So it's cool seeing like the origin of how those two characters got connected and, how she kind of had good intentions of like protecting people. And then, she uses that to actually oppress people. And then we kind of see the origin of how she becomes kind of like the dictator of that village that we see her character in Mando season 2 and the tension that she has with the villagers and whatnot. So I thought it was pretty cool. It's kind of a bummer seeing this after Ahsoka because we know where she ends up. Spoiler alert, she ends up getting killed at the very end of that season of Ahsoka. So it's kind of like weird seeing like her origin story and then knowing like where her character is going to end up and everything. Unless she gets resurrected with Night Sister magic or something and becomes a character in Ahsoka season 2 and wants revenge on Thrawn or whatever she wants to do. But yeah, overall I thought like her storyline was really cool and yeah, really dark and really intense. But yeah, I kind of want more Thrawn in it. But I know it's a little teaser and then we'll get more of him in Ahsoka season 2 and the Mando crossover film and everything. But yeah, like I said, I just want more stuff. But yeah, overall I thought her storyline was cool. And then of course the Barriss Offee storyline was really, really cool, really unexpected just because she has that one appearance in season 5 of Clone Wars. She frames Ahsoka for a crime that she actually committed and, ends up obviously, going to prison. Ahsoka and Anakin and all the Jedi, finally unveil the whole conspiracy that's been going on and they prove that Barriss Offee was guilty of the crime and everything. So she gets put in prison. And, I really thought that was going to be the end of her, but I'm glad that Dave Filoni kind of brought her back into Tales of the Empire. And yeah, definitely gave her character a lot more development than I was expecting. The fact that, she kind of starts off, being recruited by the Inquisitors and, a little cameo by Darth Vader to be another Inquisitor. And I really thought that she was going to end up being like the seventh sister that we see in Rebel Season 2. I know she turns out that she still has a good heart. And then when she's paired with Lynn to kind of go out to all these villages and like, oppress them, hunt down different Jedi who are still around, seeing like her heart of like wanting to protect this little boy. And then Lynn, wiping out the whole village and everything like that. that, I thought that was like really like emotional episode. It's funny that like all these like animated shows that Dave Filoni are kind of better than the live action shows that have been happening lately. So maybe Star Wars animation is the way to go, but we'll see. But yeah, I thought that was a really good episode. The next episode where they're trying to find the other Jedi, and the fact that Barriss betrays Lynn and then saves the Jedi and everything, and, kind of turns her back on the Inquisitors, and then kind of wants to become more of like a healer and a teacher, and people from far and wide are trying to seek her help and everything, and she's kind of becoming kind of like this guru character who's kind of like isolates herself in the mountains. I thought that was really cool. And then also these people who have Force sensitive children are trying to go to her for advice and for help, and seek sanctuary and things like that. How Barriss is trying to like help all these families, but then eventually Lynn finds her and then tries to kill off this new Force user, and then Barriss is trying to like stop her. She kind of goes into like the cave and gets lost and everything, and Barriss is trying to help her, but then she ends up getting killed by Lynn accidentally, stabbed through with the lightsaber. And again, I thought that was a very emotional scene as well. Lynn finally takes Barriss out of the cave and everything. The family gets away, and we're kind of left hanging like, what do we do now? Yeah, so it kind of has this kind of ambiguous ending and everything. We don't really figure out what happened to Lynn. I assume that she turned her back on the Inquisitors as well. So yeah, again, like Dave hits you in the heartstrings with like all that emotion and everything like that, and I'm just like, dang. And these are just like short stories, like something that these other series that have like hour-long episodes can't even accomplish with that emotional resonance. You can do it here in these like little short stories and everything. So yeah, again, like with Tales of the Jedi, like another great installment. Not sure if we'll get a season 3, like maybe it'll be Tales of the Sith, kind of like what I was theorizing back in like the Tales of the Jedi days, or maybe this will be it. Hopefully we'll get like a Tales of the Jedi season 2 or Tales of the Empire season 2 or something, and get more Sith side adventures or more Jedi side adventures and things like that. But yeah, both Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire, like yeah, definitely very, very good stories. And yeah, like I said before with Tales of the Jedi, I hope we get more of them. And yeah, don't really have too many bad things to say, really. Like all I really have to say is that I just wish there was more, and yeah, hopefully we'll get them more in the future. So yeah, awesome show. All right, and we'll sort of wrap up this video with The Acolyte. And yeah, this was an interesting show to say the least. Yeah, I guess going into it, I thought it would be more of like a darker, more intense mystery. They were kind of advertising it as, this kind of rising presence in the dark side. There's like these murders that are happening. This is supposed to be like a time of peace. It's supposed to be the High Republic, at least according to Ki-Adi-Mundi, who gets brought up later in the show for some reason, but I'll get to that later. In Phantom Menace saying that, the Republic's been at peace for over 1,000 years. So you kind of going into the show thinking that, all the protagonists are going to be killed off, but, it doesn't quite happen. But yeah, just to start off, like I said earlier, they're kind of advertising it as, there's like these murders going on, all these Jedi are being killed off, and, there's this like group of Jedi led by Sol, played by Lee Jung-jae, who's kind of leading this investigation to find out like who's causing all these murders. And it, kind of slowly but surely gets revealed that May is the one who's causing all these murders to be happening, and there's like suspicions that she's leaning towards the dark side and that she's working for some kind of dark side user or Sith, which gets brought up later, just casually dropped by Manji Ito's character, Kamir. Spoiler alert, Kamir turns out to be this dark side user, or, like I said earlier, drops casually like, oh yeah, he's a Sith. So that's what I thought the show was going to be, and that maybe like halfway through, Sol and May would team up in order to figure out like who this grand Sith master is, and then, bring him to justice. But maybe they wouldn't survive, and maybe this Sith master would, end up being Darth Plagueis, and that would kind of tie into Plagueis being the new Sith master, and then maybe kind of end with him seeking out a new apprentice, which would end up being Palpatine, and that would kind of set up the events for Phantom Menace, but that didn't quite happen. So I guess, the big reveal in the show is that May actually has a twin named Osha, and another big reveal is that they're virgins in the Force, and that their mother, Anastasia, and their other mother Coral, use the Force, or the thread, I guess what they call it in this show, to create life, and that life was able to split into two, so they had twins. And then, it gets revealed, spoiler, in the finale, that they're not technically twins, they're just the same person, just split up into two parts. So I guess that kind of takes the specialness out of the fact that Anakin in the Phantom Menace was the first virgins in the Force. Midichlorians were manipulated to create life within Shmi Skywalker, and then, he became the chosen one and everything. But, I guess now that kind of takes the specialness out of him. Also kind of takes the specialness out of him of being the chosen one, with the Emperor resurrecting in Rise of Skywalker, and then Rey defeating him and everything. But, I've already talked about that before, so we won't go over that. But yeah, I just think the main complaint with the show is that, it just breaks a lot of canon, kind of like what I was saying earlier with Ki-Adi-Mundi. Like, I know his birthday doesn't get mentioned in the movies, and, that's technically like G canon, George Lucas canon, and his species lifespan is explained in like expanded universe and everything like that. But I know some aspects are still canon. So I know there's the whole controversy of that, Ki-Adi Ki-Adi-Mundi's birth date was changed so that he could actually appear in the show, which just kind of raises a lot more questions than there needs to be. They could have just had a completely different Jedi, didn't even have to be Ki-Adi-Mundi in there. But yeah, that kind of just breaks the canon of, there being peace within the Republic for 1,000 years and no mentions of a Sith. And even if there was a Sith, all the Jedi would be wiped out. But clearly, this whole conspiracy is the whole kind of premise of the show, is that, like I said before, May and Osha are born to NSA and Kurl through manipulation of the thread, and they're kind of like the new chosen ones. So when Sol and the other Jedi kind of go out to find them, they sense a strong presence of the Force. They want them to become Jedi. They try to recruit them, but obviously NSA and Kurl and the rest of the witches, or whatever their race is called, don't have anything to do with the Jedi because they're kind of like enemies. So they kind of forbid Osha and May from leaving. They let her test to make sure, if they're really, Force sensitive, and obviously May pretends to flunk the test, and then Osha succeeds. So then Sol wants to recruit Osha to become the new Jedi apprentice. Then obviously May and the other sisters and the mothers don't want anything to do with that. So Coral just tells her, like, get angry. And so she does, like, yeah, I'm gonna get angry, and I'm gonna start a fire and destroy my home and everything like that, even though it's a stone structure and wouldn't catch on fire, but oh well. Then we get to episode 7, where we get the whole twist that, Anastasia was actually going to send Osha with Sol the whole time and everything like that. And, it's just a whole misunderstanding. And, when, the Night Sisters are trying to attack the Jedi and everything, use their mind manipulation powers to have the Jedi turn against each other and fight each other off and everything. Sol is trying to defend his fellow Jedi. So, ignites his lightsaber and then stabs Anastasia because she's about to turn into this big smoke monster and trying to evaporate Osha and everything. So he stabs her and she dies. And then, he tries to go save Osha. May sees the whole thing, tries to go and tell Osha, who's escaped from her room when it's like being caught on fire and everything. They reunite. They're on that kind of bridge that, kind of breaks in the center, so they can't get to each other. And then since the structure is shaking everything, it's about to fall down, Sol comes in. He's not strong enough in the Force to save both of them, so he has to let May go. And then, she obviously survives and builds up the vengeance, everything like that. And then saves Osha, brings her in as the apprentice, and then hides the secret and everything like that. And then as this story goes on, more and more gets revealed about their past and everything, which is kind of another aspect, which is like, I feel like this could have just been a movie, maybe just like a 2.5 hour movie or something, or just like a 6 episode series, kind of like what I was saying with other shows and everything. Like this could have just been just a really short season. Didn't need to set up for a season 2 or anything like that, which we'll get to in a second, the full finale and everything like that. Just because some episodes just really felt like they could have just been combined into one episode. Like literally these episodes are just maybe like 30, 35 minutes. These could have been like hour-long episodes, and then maybe you could have just like 4 hour-long episodes or something. Like the whole flashback episodes, like episode 3 and episode 7, really could have just been like a couple minutes, maybe like 10 minutes in the beginning. And then if you want to expand it, have episode 7 be a little bit longer flashback. But yeah, just the tone of the show, the acting was just very flat. The writing was very flat. Like there was just no suspense. Nothing really kept me on the edge of my seat. Maybe there's some surprises here and there, but really like everything was really predictable. Like a lot of like, YouTube channels I follow who, like give their theories and everything like that. Like everything was like, oh yeah, obviously this is going to happen. And then it happened in the next episode. I was like, okay, well, there's no surprise there. It's like, you're not really setting up a good mystery if people can kind of predict what the next steps are going to be and everything like that. It's not really engaging. So that was kind of like a fault of the show for sure. I thought the action was really cool, especially episode 5, the whole lightsaber duel with, the big reveal that Kamir turns out to be Smilo Ren, as people call it, or the Stranger, I know is his official name. So I thought that was cool. I think, the strongest parts were definitely Mei Jacinto as the Stranger and Li Zhengjing as Sol. You can tell like they're carrying this whole show on their backs and everything because like they weren't getting anything from these other actors. So they're just like very flat, very obvious, just not very engaging. But I like their characters. I thought they were really cool. It's too bad that Sol ended up getting killed off. But I guess we'll see what happens with season 2. I have no idea if we're gonna get a season 2. I guess jumping into the finale, the whole twist is that Vanestra Rowe finds out about this whole conspiracy. Her and her fellow Jedi, go to the planet of Brendok to go confront May, Sol, Kamir, and Osha. So they find them, May, Osha, and Kamir are on the run. May decides to stay behind and kind of take the fall, and Kamir kind of uses the Force on May to like wipe her memory so she has no idea like what happened since she was, 8 years old. So then she gets taken into custody, and then Osha turns to the dark side. You get the whole reveal that Sol killed Anastasia. So then Osha turns to the dark side, because she already had those dark side tendencies within her anyway, because that was the whole reason why she couldn't be Sol's apprentice at the beginning because, she had these dark side tendencies, so she turned away from the Jedi Council and everything like that. So she turns to the dark side, the kyber crystal in her lightsaber after she steals it from Sol turns from blue to red, so that indicates that she's a dark side user. And then she goes off with Kamir, very Last Jedi fan fiction-y tone, that whole storyline that's going on since episode 6 or whatever it was, since the whole Parent Trap switcheroo, which was kind of ridiculous too, with May knocking Osha out, and then, May using lightsaber to cut her hair perfectly straight so she looks just like Osha with the whole switcheroo and everything. But anyway, yeah, so get to the finale. May and Kamir are like working together. Osha's holding the lightsaber and then Kamir puts his hand over it. So it's kind of like this forbidden romance kind of thing, like this Last Jedi fan fiction between like Rey and Kylo and all this stuff. So we'll see if we get a season 2. If you could just go on social media, like the hate for the show is definitely very eminent. Some of it's very like unfounded, but some of it's kind of legitimate because the show just really isn't that great. I mean, if they do get a season 2, like they really just need writers who can tell like good mystery and everything. Get the writers from like True Detective or something to write the show. Just get more engaging characters, story, plot, twists, themes, tension, build that mystery up. So I don't know if Leslie Headland will stay for another season. Maybe she will. Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger and Disney, I feel like they just don't really care about the fans at this point. They just care about pushing their own agendas and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a season 2, but yeah, I don't know if I'd watch it because after this season ended, like I wasn't like on the edge of my seat, like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And then, the whole scene with like Pranestra Rowe meeting with Yoda, for reinforcement, seeing the back of Yoda's head and everything. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, if they do get a season 2, there's just going to be a lot of redirection, so to speak, to make it fit within the continuity that was established in Phantom Menace. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I guess there's not really too much left I have to say about the show. I think I've kind of just laid it all out on the table. Yeah, like overall, it just wasn't a great show. Like I wasn't trying to go into the show like hating it or anything, but yeah, I definitely didn't love it while I was watching it. Tried my patience a lot watching the show. It kind of reminded me of like She-Hulk back in the day, just going from episode to episode, expecting it to get better, but either just staying the same or getting worse as it went. Good things, Li Jung-Jang as Sol was good, but he's dead now, so we'll see what happens with that. May Jacinto as the Stranger was awesome, but I don't really care for Amanda Stenberg as Osha at this point. Just don't really think she's that great of an actress. Or maybe it's just the writing, I don't know about her acting, but yeah, or the direction that she had, but yeah, so don't really care much for where they're taking that character. And the action was cool, all the fight scenes were cool, the beginning action scene was cool, like the hand-to-hand combat with, getting Carrie-Ann Moss in there, little Matrix reference, because at first I thought, when they had her for like the first 5 minutes and she gets killed off, I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of a waste of a character. But then they kind of kept bringing her back for like the flashbacks and stuff, the same with Dean Charles Chapman, when they killed him off, I was like, oh, dang, well, that's kind of a waste. Or like Kilnaka when May goes to his planet and then sees him in his hut and like you see the lightsaber slash on him. And then he was like, wait, what the heck? Weren't we supposed to get like a Wookiee fight? And then, we get that later in episode 7 with the whole flashback and stuff like that. So it was still kind of cool, seeing it, but yeah, it just wasn't as cool. I think definitely the peak was episode 5 for sure. Seeing that whole fight and everything, Kamir in the forest and all the Jedi, killing off Yord because I didn't care about his character. But I did feel bad for Jecki. I thought she was a pretty okay character. It's too bad she got killed off, because there's so many characters in Star Wars who get stabbed once and then they come back, like Reva or Sabine or something. So you have to stab them 3 times to make sure that they're dead. So yeah, I felt bad for Jecki for getting killed off because I thought she was pretty cool. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about the show. Again, we'll see what happens with season 2, but just based on the response that Disney and Star Wars have been getting, just from like the negativity of the show, like maybe they shouldn't risk making a season 2 unless they, like I said before, just hire some really good writers and directors to take on the mantle and stuff like that. But yeah, those are my overall thoughts on The Acolyte. Obviously I had a lot to say, but yeah, we'll see how it goes in the future. Yeah, so in conclusion, that's kind of the state that we're in with Disney Star Wars. Yeah, we're definitely in a very negative state right now. Yeah, I feel like really like our only hope right now is like Dave Filoni. And I hope, Dave Filoni and, maybe Jon Favreau can maybe like step up to the plate a little bit more, try to defend us like hardcore Star Wars fans. Obviously, don't listen to the haters and everything like that, the racists and the sexist people out there who are, really just trying to bring down Star Wars, the toxicity and everything like that, but like the people who just generally just care about the universe that George Lucas created with those 6 movies, back in the day, and, obviously like Clone Wars and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm hoping that, Dave Filoni can kind of shut out the pressure that Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy are kind of putting on him and his creative team to, kind of have this agenda-driven Star Wars landscape that's going on. I just hope that they can just stay true to the core of what Star Wars is, making these stories hopeful, making these stories inspirational, and, just making these stories that just have this, classic, good versus evil quality to them and everything, and, not just have these like political, social agendas going on. But, I guess that's what happens when, you sell your baby to a big corporation. And then I know George Lucas had, a lot of pressure from Bob Iger to sell his company. He was just, being beaten up, ever since the prequels, with trying to stay true to like what he believes Star Wars is, and then, the fans just negatively reacting to him. So I understand like why he wanted to just split off from Star Wars and just sell it to Disney, and, which caters to like the lowest common denominator and everything like that. They have to appeal to everyone, they can't offend everyone, they have to have stories that appeal to every single demographic and everything like that, instead of just telling a good story with good characters and good development and everything like that, and, something that stays true to what's came before in the past, with the original trilogy and so on. So yeah, we're definitely kind of in, I guess, like a downturn for Star Wars, that's for sure. And yeah, I just hope, like I said, that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau can, have like an upswing, with their upcoming project. I'm really hoping that Ahsoka season 2 is really good. I'm really hoping that Mandalorian season 4 is really good. I'm definitely excited for Andor season 2, because that's, definitely one of the best shows that's happened, on Disney Plus. And yeah, I'm excited for the Dave Filoni Mando crossover film. I think that would be really cool to wrap up all the storylines that were set up in Mando and Ahsoka and Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew, like however that show goes. I'm hoping for that. Hopefully Skeleton Crew will be good too. So yeah, so we'll see what happens with the future of Star Wars. But yeah, we're definitely in the downturn for it. And yeah, I'm just hoping that we can have an upswing in the future, and that, we can have projects that fans can be united on again, and that we won't be divided on it. And yeah, we can just be swept up in a good story a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. What's your favorite Disney Star Wars movie? What's your least favorite Disney Star Wars movie or TV show or anything like that? Yeah, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos. And I'll see you next time. And may the Force be with you always.